I want to talk about our common responsibilities in the face of a common danger. The events of recent weeks may have helped to illuminate that challenge for some, but the dimensions of its threat have loomed large on the horizon for many years. Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. But I do ask every publisher, every editor, and every newsman in the nation to re-examine his own standards and to recognize the nature of our country's peril. In time of war, the government and the press have customarily joined in an effort based largely on self-discipline to prevent unauthorized disclosures to the enemy. In times of clear and present danger, the courts have held that even the privileged rights of the First Amendment must yield to the public's need for national security. Today, no war has been declared, and however fierce the struggle may be, it may never be declared in the traditional fashion. Our way of life is under attack. Those who make themselves our enemy are advancing around the globe. The survival of our friends is in danger, and yet no war has been declared. No borders have been crossed by marching troops. No missiles have been fired. If the press is awaiting a declaration of war before it imposes the self-discipline of combat conditions, then I can only say that no war ever posed a greater threat to our security. If you are awaiting a finding of clear and present danger, then I can only say that the danger has never been more clear, and its presence has never been more imminent. It requires a change in outlook, a change in tactics, a change in missions by the government, by the people, by every businessman or labor leader, and by every newspaper. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. It conducts the Cold War, in short, with a wartime discipline no democracy would ever hope or wish to match. Nevertheless, every democracy recognizes the necessary restraints of national security. And the question remains whether those restraints need to be more strictly observed if we are to oppose this kind of attack as well as outright invasion. For the facts of the matter are that this nation's foes have openly boasted of acquiring through our newspapers information they would otherwise hire agents to acquire through theft, bribery, or espionage. That details of this nation's covert preparations to counter the enemy's covert operations have been available to every newspaper reader, friend and foe alike.
I want to thank you guys for joining me for yet another documentary. I am your host, V, for this documentary. I'm the host of the Red Pill Hardcore TV show, the host of Targeted and Family Case Files, which are two shows to have yet to be released, among others like Infiltration. You guys will see those soon enough. So, but as of right now, we have a very big dilemma on our hands, and I have to continue the 5th of November series. It originally wasn't going to be a series, but I actually had one person out of the many thousands who have seen my productions say that nothing's backed by science or truth. So, we'll just dig into that a little bit and try to clarify for those who might want to naysay. Now, I'm aware of the federal agents and everything online whose job is to more or less control public opinion by being trolls online and such. That's fine. These people are always badgering me and harassing me, me being a target individual, always badgering me about me not knowing who it is I'm messing with. So, let's dig in. Let's dissect who it is exactly I'm messing with.
Since Masons believe that the ritual is their authority, then please listen as Mr. Jack Harris, a former worshipful master of the Lodge, continues to perform and explain the significance of portions of the entered apprentice degree, the first degree of Masonry.
We will now continue with our ritual in the first degree of Freemasonry. Mr. Smith, you are received into Masonry upon the point of a sharp instrument piercing your naked left breast, which is to teach you, as this is an instrument of torture to your flesh, so may the recollection thereof be to your conscience, should you ever reveal any of the secrets of Freemasonry unlawfully. Vouchsafe thine aid, Almighty Father of the universe, to this our present convention, and grant that this candidate for Masonry may dedicate and devote his life to thy service. Endue him with the competency of thy divine wisdom, that by the secrets of our art he may be better enabled to display the beauties of holiness of thy holy name. Amen. Mr. Smith, in times of imminent peril and danger, in whom do you place your trust?
In God.
Okay, so far we've got cross-dressing, apron-wearing, effeminate sorority types who want to keep secrets from everyone. Okay, so let's dig a little deeper.
Who do you think those people were? Those were not just ordinary people there. If I told you their names, I'm not going to tell you their names, but if I did, I don't think you'd sleep so well.
Broken baby doll heads and torn limbs scattered across tables. Mannequins arranged to look like corpses. And the host wearing a menacing horned mask. No, this isn't some weird horror movie. These are actual photos taken at an Illuminati ball held by none other than the Rothschilds. The leaked pictures depict a scene eerily similar to Stanley Kubrick's 1999 movie Eyes Wide Shut. Had Kubrick himself been a witness to these elite mansion parties? Kubrick died just days after showing his film to the studio, and many believe he was killed for his daring expose. And what was in the mysterious 24 minutes the studio cut from the film after his death?
And he died a day after refusing to cut 24 minutes of it. Well, they cut it. You better believe they cut out of this film.
From ancient Luciferian rituals to cannibalism and human sacrifice, what really goes on at these elite mansion parties? The aberrant perversions of the powerful so-called elite had always been a recurring theme for Kubrick, but he took it one step further in what would end up being his final film, Eyes Wide Shut, which depicted a masked ball identical to one the Rothschilds had thrown years earlier. The year was 1972, and the Rothschild mansion outside of Paris looked like it was in flames. Huge flickering orange lights projected a fiery inferno across the main edifice. It was all part of the preparation for a masked ball they were hosting, and the guest list read like a who's who of the Illuminati. Artists, fashion designers, celebrities, and royalty were greeted by men in cat masks who guided them to the main room, where Marie Helen de Rothschild waited, wearing an elaborate deer head mask with ornate horns jutting from the top. Horned masks have historically been part of ancient pagan rituals. The invites were written backwards and required a mirror to read, reflecting Satanist Aleister Crowley's edict to do everything backwards. Creepy photos taken from the event have surfaced which show their bizarre costumes and questionable decoration. Baby dolls strewn on tables as part of the decor, demonstrating their hatred for humanity. Audrey Hepburn and another attendee wore birdcage masks, signifying MK-Ultra mind control. Perhaps the weirdest picture is of men gathered around a nude female effigy, laid out on what looks to be some type of sacrificial altar. Notice the similarities to Marina Abramovic's cannibalistic cake parties, attended by the Hollywood elite, and scenes from music videos such as Katy Perry's creepy Bon Appetit. One rumor even suggested the female body was made of sugar and was actually edible. The menu from this strange event also hints at a cannibalistic undertone. Sirloin, for instance, is spelled out sirloin, like it is a person's name. And another menu item refers to an exquisite cadaver. When Cruise's character is discovered as an imposter, the man in the red cloak is sitting on a chair with a double eagle on it. The double eagle is the symbol of the Rothschild family and is found on their crest. Kubrick even filmed the salacious scenes inside an actual Rothschild mansion. But the film isn't the movie Kubrick wanted audiences to see. The studio demanded 24 minutes of the original be cut. Much speculation has been made about what might have been in that 24 minutes. Officially, Warner Brothers claimed the editing was necessary in order to obtain an R rating. This explanation doesn't make sense, however, given such a significant portion of a final cut film. 24 minutes is more than random clips. It's more likely that an entire scene was removed. A scene that could have been the climax of the entire movie. One that made all others make sense. After all, it was important enough that Kubrick refused to remove it.
I got a call, and he claimed to be one of Kubrick's top assistants before he died. In other words, he was there all the way to the end.
Wow, that's getting good.
And he told me Kubrick kept muttering to himself that the Warner Brothers executives were going to hate his film. And literally, he quoted me as saying, when they see this film, they're going to kill him. Then, on the night that he showed them the film in London, strangely enough, he had taken up smoking again, which he'd been a chain smoker earlier in life. Then he kind of slowed down, but apparently, much to this guy's surprise, he was chaining again. And he waited in the lobby, really kind of pale and distant. And then the movie ended, and the door opened, and somebody walked out and said, "Stanley, you need to come down here." And the door shut, and this guy said that he heard yelling for about 45 minutes, screaming and yelling. And he heard Kubrick say that, you can't change my film. It's in my contract. And then Kubrick stormed out first, and he followed Stanley. And that was the last time we ever saw Stanley.
Wow.
But was Stanley Kubrick really murdered for the secrets he revealed in Eyes Wide Shut? Many researchers say yes, and point to the strange coincidences surrounding the filmmaker's sudden demise.
And this is a guy who'd already done Eyes Wide Shut back in 1999, and then right before the film comes out, Stanley Kubrick ends up dead.
Right.
And he dies the same way that one of the guys died in the film. And the film, of course, exposes the cabal totally. And if you actually get the DVD and you watch Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman being interviewed for this thing, they are really freaking out about when they're asked questions about Stanley Kubrick's death.
Now you look back and you say, well, what if something, no. He never, he
Did he have any heart problem?
The man worked hard. I'd get faxes from him at 3 in the morning, and Christian was there, and, he didn't discuss that, it was sudden, it was shock. No one said, oh, that was expected, especially after a couple of days after talking to him. And
Kubrick died just days after his original cut was presented to the studio. Although he had secured complete creative control over the film, the studio refused to show whatever was in those 24 minutes. So what were they to do? Many believe the Hollywood elites, angry over his expose, murdered Stanley Kubrick so that they could edit the film, and there would be no way he could ever reveal what was in the original version.
Look at Eyes Wide Shut, Stanley Kubrick, who you better believe got invited to things like this. And there's names very similar to George Soros in it, as the bad guy character. And his wife, he finds out, is really an occultist. And he died a day after refusing to cut 24 minutes of it. Well, they cut it. You better believe they cut out of this film.
The timing of his death is also curious, being exactly 666 days before January 1st, 2001. One of Kubrick's most acclaimed films is 2001: A Space Odyssey.
I think the fact that Stanley died exactly 666 days before January 1st, 2001, the first day of the year of his greatest film. That worries me, I have to tell you. I think that's a signal, and I hope to, the heavens above that he wasn't murdered, but somehow that seems like an Illuminati signal.
A Space Odyssey. In Death, Kubrick once again blends fiction and reality, as if he himself were a character in this sordid tale. But there's just one problem. Stanley died of a heart attack. Could the Illuminati really make a murder look like a heart attack? In a 1975 Church Committee hearing, it was revealed that the CIA had a weapon capable of doing just that.
Also, I had to find, one time they wanted me to find out if there was such a thing as a poison that was undetectable, especially one that seemed to mimic a heart attack, that would kill someone, but it would appear that they had a heart attack. I did find such a thing.
Does this pistol fire the dart?
Yes, it does, Mr. Chairman, and a special one was developed which potentially would be able to enter the target without perception.
The poison was frozen into some sort of dart, and then it was shot at very high speed into the person, so when it reached the person, it would melt inside them, and the only thing would be like one little tiny red dot on their body, which was hard to detect. There wouldn't be a needle left or anything like that in the person.
But also the toxin itself would not appear in the autopsy?
Yes, so that there was no way of perceiving that the target was him.
What else did Kubrick show in those 24 minutes? Everyone in the crew signed lengthy contracts and strict confidentiality agreements, so almost no verifiable information is available. However, most rumors contend that it had something to do with the shocking Illuminati mansion party. This type of event actually dates back to ancient times, such as the Greek and Roman Bacchanalia festival, which involved masked orgies as part of the invocation of pagan gods. The old-moneyed European aristocrats have been secretly attending such events for hundreds of years. In fact, Traum Novelle, the story from which Kubrick based the screenplay, was about a couple who experiences a similar party in upper-class Austria around the turn of the century. Austria is near the Bavarian region of Germany, where the original Bavarian Illuminati was founded. Alice is seduced by a hypnotic older gentleman who introduces himself as Sandor Savost, which many believe to be a reference to Anton Sandor LaVey, founder and high priest of the Church of Satan. One of the mysterious women who leads Bill off introduces herself as Nuala Windsor.
Do you know Nuala Windsor?
Alluding to British royalty and their association with the Cabal. One mask in particular is said to bear a resemblance to Bob Hope, who has been named by whistleblowers as an MK Ultra handler.
Before today, you've refrained from naming names. Would you like to tell us who was involved in these various activities that you've described before?
Yes, I would, Ted. It's real scary for me, but I'd like to go on public record saying that my owner under mind control was Bob Hope, and that I was abused and used as a mind control sex slave.
Most believe Harford saw something profoundly disturbing at the ritual, perhaps a literal sacrifice or other such bizarre type material. Still, others speculate Kubrick may have exposed the satanic elite's use of children in their bizarre rituals as well. Elite child trafficking rings have come to light in Belgium, the UK, the US, and other countries. proving there's a much more sinister side to these secret parties. Was this what Kubrick was really trying to warn us about? He had already alluded to this theme when Bill goes to the costume shop and encounters a father prostituting his underage daughter. The name of the costume shop is Rainbow Fashions. Rainbows, rainbow symbolism, and Wizard of Oz themes are all related to MK Ultra mind control.
Don't you want to go where the rainbow ends?
And lending credence to this theory is a conversation which allegedly occurred between Nicole Kidman and the acclaimed filmmaker Stanley Kubrick. Kidman claims Kubrick told her pedophiles are running the world, going on to say he told her how the world really works and who is in charge behind the scenes while filming the movie Eyes Wide Shut. If this is what Kubrick exposed in those 24 minutes, no wonder he ended up dead. However, Nicole was never as naive to this sordid world as she may have acted. Her father, Anthony Kidman, was a high-level Luciferian himself, a member of Aleister Crowley's notorious Ordo Templi Orientis, a group that engages in ritual sex magic and ancient pagan rites. He died mysteriously after an Australian named Fiona Barnett formally named him as one of her abusers.
Throughout my childhood, I was a victim of Australia's VIP child sex trafficking ring. For example, I was prostituted to pedophile parties at Parliament House, Canberra, and to an international leader at Fairbairn Military Airport. The people involved in this elite pedophile ring included high-ranking politicians, police, and judiciary.
Kidman's stardom makes a lot more sense once we know about her elite connections. And it should come as no surprise that Kubrick cast her in the film Eyes Wide Shut. His use of a real-life couple at the time, who was also connected to a real Illuminati family, hints to the audience that this movie is not really fiction at all. With its otherworldly chanting, incense, and haunting masks, the bizarre satanic ritual is by far the most memorable scene from Eyes Wide Shut.
And here we have the Luciferian sex magic rituals. It's where all your pedophiles and other deviants come to sate their desires.
But there is another scene in the movie that upon closer inspection becomes much more disturbing. At the end of the movie, Harford and his wife Alice take their daughter to a toy store, where the girl seems to go off following two older men. Close observers have noted that these are the same two men seen at the elite Christmas party from the beginning of the movie. No doubt this was deliberate on Kubrick's part. Cruise and Kidman's characters seem oblivious to where their daughter is going. Is it possible that they sold their daughter into this elite group? It is hard to believe, but this does happen among these circles. It is important to note that the toy store scene is saturated in occult imagery. From the stars everywhere in the background to a conspicuously placed board game called Magic Circle, which references the circle used in real black magic, like the circle seen at the ritual party. As they enter the toy store, the girl points out a black antique-looking baby carriage. Yeah, exactly like the iconic one used in the movie Rosemary's Baby, in which a couple sacrifices their firstborn to an upper-class satanic cult in order to advance their status. Also notice the stuffed tigers in the foreground as the girl walks towards the two men. This is the same stuffed tiger found on the bed of the prostitute Bill sees earlier in the movie. The choice of a tiger as the stuffed animal is an obvious reference to MK Ultra beta programming, also known as sex kitten programming, which begins at a young age. Nothing on camera in a movie like this is happenstance. Everything is meticulously chosen and positioned, especially with a Kubrick film. For those with eyes that are wide open, the signs are clear. The Harfords never really escaped the cult, and their daughter is being led like a lamb to slaughter into its arms. Few filmmakers sparked more fascination or intrigue than Stanley Kubrick. Known for his controversial films and unique vision, Kubrick forever changed filmmaking. But his films were much more than visual masterpieces. They used hidden messages and meanings to reveal secret truths about our world and those who run it. In Eyes Wide Shut, Kubrick revealed some of the darkest secrets of the Luciferian elite, from MK Ultra and trafficking to real-life Illuminati rituals. But revealing such secrets is a dangerous game, one that for Kubrick may have proven deadly.
Okay, so, yeah, they cut out the ritualistic, homosexual, Bohemian Grove type of stuff. Probably a lot of bestiality, and more than likely, probably almost guaranteed, a lot of pedophilic stuff. See, the elitists don't want you to know that they're pedophiles, and pedophiles run the world, which is a fact. But I want to get into this symbolism mention. Now, we know the stars. Stars means, stars are equivalent to an angel. Okay, we all know these people worship Lucifer. They're all Luciferians. Lucifer fell from the sky. Okay, the fallen devil who runs the world. Okay, the lighthouse. I'm not sure if anyone understands the lighthouse with the black and white checker patterns. See, in Freemasonry, the black and white checkered patterns, that is the duality of nature, left and right. Basically, the Hegelian dialect under which they control us. Basically, you know, give us a problem, and then they offer a solution. Now, these checkers are underneath the one eye, the lighthouse, Lucifer's one eye. And people need to really understand. And now, I've never heard anyone talk about this, and I'm going to go ahead and whistleblow on this right now. The rainbow in itself is symbolism of Lucifer, yes. Why? Because the rainbow is all visible within the light spectrum. But moreover, the real secret behind the rainbow symbolism is the mind control. These people have figured out many ways through their control over government and religious and educational institutions around the world that they can influence the mind by different spectrums of energy. You know, the epileptic seizure weapon, or, you know, basically controlling you with a TV, even. The applications are endless for the full spectrum dominance that these people want to have. Now, Lucifer is the light, but Lucifer is also matter. These people don't want to tell you that the darkness, the void, is God. Even though it's in every religious text. Light came out of darkness. These people are very terrified of what they can't understand, and that is the infinite void. Space. What they do understand and try to control is light. Matter. Flesh. Debauchery. They think to purify themselves or to live an eternal life by taking the lives of small innocent children as they come out of darkness into light. Fresh light. It's ritualistic. You know, there's superstition, there's science behind it. You know, these people draining children of their adrenochrome to live forever, bathing their blood, and such and such and such. all hedonistic corruption garbage. And when I say these people are Luciferian, well, they really are. They worship Lucifer. And a man who they consider a prophet, whose words they live by to this day, is Albert Pike. Who's Albert Pike? Let's take a look.
This video will cover Grand Wizard Albert Pike's 3 World War predictions, which are quite frankly stunning. But first, I want to give a background on the person who exposed the Illuminati's preparations for World War III and how they plan to use Islam to destroy the West. A secret diary was released by a man with information about elitist organizations and the New World Order. This diary documents that the Illuminati already knows what is going to happen for World War III. It's already mapped out. The agenda's already set. The diary that exposes this agenda belonged to a man named William Carr, who was born in 1895. Carr entered into Canada's Royal Navy at a very young age and ascended to the position of commander. He knew many at the top of their fields in politics and law and in academia. His side hobby was writing books, specifically books on the New World Order. His books documented the breadth in which the Illuminati had taken over all aspects of society, including churches and seminaries. In fact, Carr claimed to have received an SOS letter from a high-ranking official in the Roman Catholic Church in November 1958. The letter outlined a hostile takeover that was underway in the Vatican, the Illuminati having infiltrated the Vatican's quarters. Carr would die less than a year after receiving the SOS message. Carr also documented history behind the most elusive organization in world history, the Illuminati, and their religion, which is Luciferianism. He believed that modern organizations, including the Bilderberg Group and the Council on Foreign Relations, are Luciferian political organizations. He also believed that the chief governing body for Lucifer, for the ascension of the capstone, was the United Nations, and he documented this in his books. Carr wrote several books. His most controversial book was published after his death. It is called Satan, Prince of this World, and is really nothing more than Carr's personal diary and notes he saved for many years. In this book, Carr documents receiving the SOS letter from the high-ranking Vatican official, but he also documents other interesting things. For example, Carr believed that secret societies weren't working independently of one another, but that they were controlled by a top-level organization called the World Revolutionary Movement. And that's literally in his book, Satan, Prince of the World. This organization at the top tier is interested in inciting war, terrorism, and distress to serve its fundamental interests. And that is to establish the New World Order, a Luciferian system of governance and religion. Carr speaks at length about World War III in his book, Satan, Prince of the World. He documents that World War III was planned by a 33rd degree Grand Wizard named Albert Pike. Albert Pike was a notorious Luciferian who openly praised Lucifer in his book Moral and Dogma of the Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Pike was also a general for the Confederacy during the Civil War, and a wizard of occult magic, channeling and summoning of spirits. William Carr documented that Albert Pike wrote a letter to a friend in 1871 outlining the final and largest of the wars. According to Carr, what Albert Pike actually wrote was a lot more than a letter. It was a blueprint that spelled out exactly what would happen in the last war. Carr said, quote, "In the 1860s, Albert Pike is recorded as saying his military program might take 100 years or a little longer to reach the day when those who direct the conspiracy at the top will crown their leader king despot of the entire world and impose a Luciferian totalitarian dictatorship upon what is left of the human race." That's what they're saying. Pike seems to indicate a conspiracy to start a war so that the Antichrist can ascend to his position as world ruler. Pike's letter ironically also detailed the specifics of the first two wars with stunning accuracy, suggesting that he knew before time the details surrounding each of the wars. World War I, according to Pike, would be fought to overthrow the czars in Russia and change Russia into a communist state. The Second World War would be fought for two reasons: to establish the State of Israel and to expand communist control over Europe. The Third World War will be what allows the Novus Ordo Seclorum to rise out of the dust. According to Pike, Islam will be the central factor in the downfall of the West. Islam will be decimated in the process, allowing for the new religion of pure Luciferianism to spread on the earth. All Muslims will fall for this system. There isn't a single Muslim on earth who will not partake in the religion of the New World Order, according to Pike. Islam is merely a tool to destroy the Christian West. That's it. That's all it is. It's a tool. That's what they said hundreds of years ago. The master plan to use Islam was kicked off in 2001 when the fear of Americans was taken advantage of by an esoteric cabal lurking in the shadows. In his inaugural address, George W. Bush proclaimed that an angel would ride the whirlwind and direct the storm. The master plan was unveiled in 2001 for World War III. They started Albert Pike's blueprint when they flew 2 planes into the World Trade Centers and blamed it on Islam. The storm that would come and the angel that would bring it were long-awaited prophetic fulfillments. And as Albert Pike, Grand Wizard of the Craft, had predicted, Islam would be the choice religion to use to foment a crisis between it and the West that would only get worse. What is the common factor every time we see a crisis? Who's behind it? Islam. And they want you to believe it's organically an issue of Islam. This was planned hundreds of years ago. And they have quite a plan for Islam. The esoteric cabal is using Islam to achieve the great work. It's all been mapped out. We've seen what they're doing with the migrant crisis. We've seen what they've done in England with the Sharia courts, and on and on and on. They're using Islam to stir the pot. The system has to come down. It has to topple. Islam will be used for the ultimate goal, and that is to fully usher in the Luciferian capstone. They're going to keep using it to destroy Western Christianity, Western culture. It's going to happen, and there's really nothing you can do about it except to pray. That's it. That's what we're called to do. It's been predicted. They've known about this since at least the late 1800s. And even earlier than that, I think. All world wars have been mapped out. The third and the last one was already written in the books. You have no control over this. This is a battle between principalities and powers and dominions. And that is why Our brother Paul told us to pray and to go to war against those principalities and powers.
And from the ashes of their world, we'll build a better one.
Do you not think an angel rides in the whirlwind and directs this storm?
Out of these troubled times, our fifth objective, a new world order can emerge, a new era, freer from the threat of terror.
This work continues. The story goes on, and an angel still rides in the whirlwind and directs this storm.
A world where the United Nations, freed from Cold War stalemate, is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Now, didn't I tell you? Okay, now this is not a surprise. Truthers are going to be watching this documentary, and that's fine. You know, thank you for your interest and your viewership. But really, this documentary is for those who don't know. And we need to educate. Okay? And I really want to get down to the Luciferian concept here. The Luciferians whom are worshipped. Christians are tricked into thinking God is light. Light is God. This is the Luciferian deception. Okay? Every religious book, I'll say it again, the Big Bang Theory, anywhere you look, the text says, from out of darkness comes light. So don't be deceived, especially those in Catholicism, the Christian Church. Now, if you don't believe me that the Christian Church worships Lucifer, well, let's just dig down into it.
Lucifer, what is your problem?
Just that, sir.
Okay.
I'm a Christian, sir.
I'm pure and virtuous and wholesome and innocent. How can you say anything bad about me?
Sir, you need to be born again.
I am born again.
Now, did you just say that you are Lucifer?
I am Lucifer.
Okay, define Lucifer for me.
Pure, virtuous, wholesome, innocent individual that's out to help people.
Lucifer is?
Yeah.
Say that again. Lucifer is a pure, holy...
Virtuous.
Virtuous. Now, is he the Lucifer that God created?
That's the same one.
Oh, man, this is great. I'm going to put this on the internet.
Oh,
Amen.
God bless you,
Amen.
brother.
Because that's exactly what the Shriners and Masons teach, is that Lucifer is light.
Recently, the chief exorcist at the Vatican reported that the devil was in the Vatican.
Morgan. Well, Reverend Gabriele Amorth made headlines around the world recently when he said the devil was present in the Vatican.
You're talking about something very real, aren't you?
Certo, realissima. Dico, se credete al Vangelo, credete all'esistenza del demonio.
Absolutely, very real.
As to the devil's presence in the Vatican, he says that's no surprise. He once had to perform an exorcism on another exorcist.
The first thing we need to do if we're going to find out if the devil is at the Vatican is take a tour underneath the Vatican. As we arrive underneath the Vatican, we see that it's laid out in a number of rooms marked by letters, as we can see in this aerial view map. Now we will be exploring some of the rooms in this map. Let's start off by looking in room C here. As we look into the room, we see that this is a mausoleum of Lucius Tullius Zethus. The Vatican goes on and explains that this room was used for offerings to the dead. we read, "View of the north wall and mosaic floor. In the corners of the mosaic floor there are 8 marble squares with circular holes through which offerings to the dead were poured during the funeral rites carried out in the burial chamber." So here we have a room where offerings are done to the dead. That's pretty common in Catholicism. Now if we look in the next room, room E, so here in this room they have a vase which has the image of a Medusa. So here underneath the Vatican we have a Medusa. Again, we ask ourselves the question, this is a vase, but yet it's kept underneath the Vatican. This could have easily been removed. If the Vatican was a holy church, you would think that they would have done this. You think underneath the Vatican they would have things that are sacred to Christ and not foreign gods, not idols and images of foreign gods. Now as we move down further to room H, here we see that this is the mausoleum that is one of the largest and most luxurious mausoleums underneath the Vatican of St. Peter's Basilica. It says that it was built at the beginning of the second half of the 2nd century during the reign of Emperor Marcus Aurelius and belonging to a freedman of the important Valeri family. And as we're in this mausoleum, we see that there's lots of idols from the old Roman Empire. We ask ourselves, why does Rome keep these idols down underneath St. Peter's Basilica? You would think if they were Christians, they would want to clean all this out. I can't imagine anybody who has a true church would keep idols in their churches, especially pagan idols left over from a bygone pagan era. But here we have the Vatican keeping many pagan idols underneath St. Peter's Basilica. Here is an idol the Vatican is displaying of a head of a child in gilded stucco and a lock of a hair typical of one initiated into the cult of Isis. And this particular idol is an idol of a boy who was initiated into the cult of Isis. If we look in this room, we see that some of the stucco decorating the walls. Here we have a personification of Oceanus. You remember the New Testament book of Revelation says that a beast comes out of the ocean. And so we say, why is the Vatican having these foreign gods underneath its basilica? Why is it protecting them? If it was a true church, it couldn't be doing it for the sake of art, especially with all the evil things that are happening in the Vatican. And as the priest earlier said, that evil does exist, the devil is real, as he admitted. But the hypocrisy of all of this is that they have all these evil images and idols underneath the Vatican of St. Peter's Basilica. We also see 2 figures of genuses with bat wings also portrayed on the walls. Again, this is supposed to be a holy church and a holy place. Now this is supposedly all there for many, many years. As we move into the next room, room I, the details of the mosaic floor with Mercury and Pluto's chariot, they go on and explain that this theme is an explicit reference to the overcoming of death and the return of the afterlife. They describe it as a splendid mosaic floor of Mercury is depicted carrying a caduceus with wings at his ankles, walking in front, and a chariot carrying Pluto and his wife Persephone. So here we have all these Roman gods underneath the Vatican, images of foreign gods. Well, as we move to the next room, we find out why they keep all these idols down there in these images. As we move to room U, here we find the shock of all shocks. Here on the wall, it says there is a depiction of Lucifer, that is, the light bearer, the morning star. On the opposite of the wall, there is a drawing of Vesper, the evening star, cosmic symbol of the human life cycle. We find out that when we get to room U, here we have a clear depiction of Lucifer underneath the Vatican, at St. Peter's Basilica. We ask ourselves, why are they keeping this image of Lucifer underneath the Vatican? Again, you would think if you're a Christian church, you would not want to have any of these images. Now we know that they'll go on and say, oh, well, we're saving it because it's a UNESCO heritage site or something like that. This is always their excuse, saving it for the sake of art. But for the true Christian, this is not an excuse, because we know if you're giving glory and propaganda to false deities and false pagan gods, what are you doing? You're in essence supporting the evil spiritual realm. This cannot be from God. And since Rome claims itself to be the one true church, you would think they would lead by example. But what kind of example is this? That you have a depiction of Lucifer underneath the Vatican for countless hundreds and hundreds of years? Now this image here underneath the Vatican has been there since their claim, which would be Constantine. We would know that he was the first one that built this basilica. And so again we ask ourselves, why are they keeping this depiction of Lucifer underneath the Vatican? Well, we think the answer for why all these images, idols, are kept underneath the Vatican is because what we're dealing with here is we're dealing with an apostate church that has always been apostate, and even now as it is filled with Freemasons. And so we know that the reason why they're keeping all of this there now, and they're actually revealing this on their internet website, is because they want people to see this. They want people to see what they're really all about. For the masses who believe that Rome is still a pure church, they don't mind deceiving them into believing that they are still a Christian church. As you go down underneath the Vatican, down into the next rooms, they will try to convince you on this tour that you take that Peter is buried down there in one of the rooms, and that this gives credence to following the Pope. But we ask the question, why would you want to follow a Pope who has all these evil things underneath his church? It's very clear by this depiction of Lucifer that the devil is in the Vatican. He's hidden way down underneath the Vatican at St. Peter's Basilica. Now, if you are a Catholic and you are watching this video, we want to encourage you to come out of that church. As you can see from these images and these idols that are kept underneath your church, we would hope that you would soberly think about these things and ask yourself the question, if my church is a true church, why is it promoting these things? Why does it even want people to see these things?
So, not only Luciferian artifacts, paintings, these things found underneath the Vatican, pagan gods. Now, we all know how Christianity, especially Catholicism, hates paganism. So they say. But yet, in the reality, Christianity is an offshoot or a religion that devoured and used the same concepts of previous religions, like the cult of Mithra, for example. They're in Rome. Now, what did the cult of Mithra do in Rome? Well, Mithra had 12 apostles. Mithra was a Messiah deity, and so forth. One thing that people don't understand is the rituals and the practices have continued on from the old days, including pedophilia. Case in point, the statue, the head of the child. Now you have an underground tunnel, an underground structure with multiple rooms, a catacomb, which is also reflected in other areas of the Illuminati's operations. You guys see underground tunnels, you know, Pizzagate, you know, underground military bases, my labs, where they're doing experiments on people, children, trafficking children, and so forth. It's all done underground. A lot of stuff's done underground. But one thing I want to point out is that the rituals, everything's ritualistic. When you see that the piece of hair, the initiate. Now, this is mirrored in other places as well. There's always that piece of hair. It's not only just there for symbolism, it's there for a meaning, tutelage, okay? You have a mentor and you have an apprentice. What the ancient Greeks do, what the ancient Romans do, grown men took little boys under mentorship. Now these little boys would have this locks of hair. These little boys were also sodomized by their teachers. But what other place have you seen this lock of hair ordeal? Oh, Star Wars. Right? The Padawan has a single lock of hair underneath his master. Now, this is the programming that we receive through mainstream entertainment, which are controlled by the Illuminati and entertainment industry. Now, we all know what the church is doing. We know the history of it. Or do we? There seems to be some things missing. I know that there's a connection between the pedophilia, between the Catholics and what's going over here. I mean, the CIA had been running children, trafficking children, just like the cocaine, just like the guns, just like anything else. We all know about their mind control experiments on children, MK Ultra, the sex slave narrative, and so forth. So why?
An astonishing admission by the Roman Catholic Church. They run the CIA. Did you know the CIA is also dubbed Catholic Intelligence Agency? Catholics in Action. Is the CIA truly American? For decades, Jesuit affiliates of the Roman Catholic Church have directed the CIA. Leon Panetta and John Brennan, the current director, are Jesuit trained. Are Jesuits today the same as Jesuits of the past? Are you familiar with the Jesuit oath? Its devious plans to control the wealth of the nations, enslave the masses, and depopulate the world. Pope Francis is a Jesuit. Should we be alarmed that the institution the Pope heads also controls the CIA? The CIA's mission is to identify and destroy terrorists and fundamentalists. Pope Francis likewise, and defines them as those who believe in absolute truth, end-time prophecies of Daniel and the Revelation, refuse to yield their liberty of conscience and give up constitutional rights. The insidious agenda of the Jesuits will soon be realized, as Pope Francis has been hailed Lord of the world and Savior of the earth.
What does CIA stand for?
The Central Intelligence Agency.
That is correct. That is what the CIA stands for. Now, do you know what the primary job of the CIA is?
I think their primary job would be similar to the police force, but more the head of law enforcement.
Now, Marianne, what is the primary job of the CIA?
I believe it has to do with foreign intelligence.
The CIA is the foreign spying agency for America.
That is also correct. Now, they collect, analyze, evaluate, and disseminate foreign intelligence in order to help make decisions that relate to national security. So you're right.
So Jerome, can you guess what religious group has predominantly run the CIA?
I would assume Christians or Catholics.
Now, can you guess what religious group has predominantly run the CIA?
I'm going to assume or guess the Catholic religion.
That is correct. Why do you guess that?
because I figured that they might have a lot of involvement with the CIA.
Now, the CIA has been predominantly run by Roman Catholics, and a high percentage of them have been members of the Jesuit Society.
Yeah.
So, do you know who Jesuits are, Marianne?
Kind of, yes. I was raised Catholic, so I'm familiar with Jesuits.
Okay. And what can you tell me about Jesuits?
Well, they seem to be more liberal priests, I guess.
All right, so they are a male congregation in the Roman Catholic Church, as you know. And so what we're going to do is just read the Jesuit oath, okay? So have you follow along. It says,
I furthermore promise and declare that I will,
when opportunity present, make and wage relentless war, secretly or openly, against all heretics.
I will hang, waste, boil, flay, strangle, and bury alive.
Rip up the stomachs and wombs of their women in order to annihilate forever their terrible race. So, Lucas, what are your thoughts on the Jesuit oath?
Well, based on that oath, I'm not too fond of the group. I haven't really looked into what else they claim to stand for, but it's kind of concerning to have a group, like you said, so involved in central intelligence and everything, and being so motivated by these values.
So what are your thoughts on the Jesuit oath?
The Jesuits are pretty bad people. Sounds like they want to kill people. That's not a good thing, is it?
Based on the Jesuit oath, the excerpt that we just read, what are your thoughts on Pope Francis being so impactful in social and political issues?
I think that we should keep our, separation of state and church. I believe that the Pope should stick to his religious issues, and then the government needs to handle the government issues.
So now, based on the Jesuit oath, because Pope Francis is a Jesuit, right? How do you feel about Pope Francis being so impactful in political and social issues?
I feel that's a sign of prophecy. So I'm not surprised. It's, the Catholic religion is a religion of a universal religion trying to get everyone in the world to follow their same creed. So that doesn't surprise me.
Wow, Sean, I was going to ask you now, are you aware that the Bible tells us there is a time coming when our liberty of conscience will be stripped away, and that those who stand true to the principles of Protestantism will not be able to buy and sell?
Yes, Revelation.
The Catholic Herald, which is a news publication for the Roman Catholic Church, gives us a new and interesting way to look at the CIA, or the Central Intelligence Agency. By professing right in the very front page of this Catholic Herald news, it states that the Catholic Church thrives in the CIA. The headlines read, "Why Catholics Thrive in the CIA." The agency has been dubbed, and I quote, "Catholics in action," end quote, because the faithful have occupied so many senior positions. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a plain easy giveaway, and it should not take a rocket scientist or anyone with great qualifications to understand that the Roman Jesuits, or should I say the Vatican, is the one that runs the Central Intelligence Agency. Make some very interesting notes here. Make note that the CIA thrives in the United States of America. It has the seal of the United States and the symbol of the United States right on it. The eagle is right there. Secondly, make note, the Jesuit order thrives primarily at the Vatican. However, what you need to understand is that the Jesuit order is a secret police for the Vatican, and what they have done is they have successfully infiltrated every other governmental structure in the world today. But they will disguise themselves as Roman Catholics, and that is because they are Roman Catholics. Just as you have Joe Biden, he is the first Roman Catholic Vice President of the United States of America. While he is the very first Vice President who is a Roman Catholic, we also have the very first Jesuit Roman Catholic leader, the Pope, Pope Francis. In case you missed it, let me go back and repeat myself again so you will understand exactly what I'm telling you. These Jesuits, though they infiltrate other governmental structures, they simply will never tell you that they are Jesuits, but they will tell you that they are simply Roman Catholics. Their allegiance belongs to the Pope. These so-called Roman Catholics, they are Jesuits, especially the ones who are in political structures or in judicial positions of power. The United States of America is run by Jesuits. They used the order of the Masons as scapegoats. The majority of people, the minute they hear the words Freemason, they automatically think the most evil secret society. But when they hear Jesuits, they think, oh, Pope Francis is a Jesuit, he's a good person, he's a Roman Catholic. I think the Jesuits are connected to the Roman Catholics. They have hospitals and schools and many other good institutions, so they're not that bad. But that's how they operate. They operate in a very subtle way. The evidence for this is that we see a reflection between America and the Vatican. The United States Capitol is designed to resemble the Vatican. The obelisk in the United States of America also is a direct reflection of the obelisk of Rome and the Vatican. The symbols of sun worship within the Freemasons and within the Jesuit order, it's all the exact same. Going back to the CIA, when we look at the symbol of the CIA, the United States seal, what we also
Okay, so we've established the connection between the pedophiles, the Catholic Church, the intelligence community, the Illuminatards in general. So, with that said, I really have a pet peeve here. Now, I know it's only because of what I know about the occult and so forth. Satanism. Now, people want to say, oh, Satanist this, Satanist that. These are Luciferians. Okay, Satan was an angel in the Bible who actually worked for God. Okay, read the book of Job. If you want to go to Islam, the Satan was spirits of fire who either was against God or with God. Okay, you can't call these people the Satanists. These are Luciferians. Okay. This is something that really needs to be cleared up in the language, because they're deceiving us by calling everything Satanism. So that they can, I mean, they put out these statues out now with Baphomet, you know, telling everyone that they're God, you know, they're Lucifer. They all think they're God. Let's put that out there right now. These Luciferians, each and every one of them, think they're God. As dangerous as a mentality as that is, I really want to know, how dangerous is it for it to be in our government, especially military, especially in our security agencies.
In our investigation, we discovered that some of Satan's soldiers are also high-ranking officers in the United States military. Here at San Francisco's Presidio Army Base, for example, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino led a double life as a satanic high priest. The colonel's cult is listed in the San Francisco telephone book, and his phone answering machine boasts of his affiliation.
This is the Temple of Set. The temple is the only international satanic religious institution fully recognized by the United States government.
Indeed, the Army does officially recognize Satanism as a legitimate religion and supplies chaplains with this guide for ministering to the satanic soldier. Yet unofficially, some charge that Army bases have become sanctuaries for devil worshippers. Just last month, under a full moon, I took a midnight tour of the Presidio grounds with police investigator Ed Abanofsky.
Are you saying that there was a satanic cult active right here on the Army base?
Yes, we believe so. There's evidence to substantiate that. They had satanic rituals going on. There's an altar in there, and all of the graffiti on the wall would indicate that.
Let's see if I can see it. How'd you find this place?
This is a fortification during World War II. During World War II, where they had gun batteries.
I can see a pentagram painted on the wall. I can see the words Prince of Darkness. On this wall, I see several inverted crosses and other obvious satanic ritualistic paintings or symbols.
Joseph, we've agreed to conceal your identity, but you are an officer in the United States Army.
That's correct.
And you were an officer in the United States Army during the time you were a member of this satanic organization.
Yes.
Did the authorities at the Presidio know that a satanic organization was active on their base during the time that you were a member?
They were very much aware of it, yes.
The present base commander, Colonel Rafferty, says that today, at least,
I know of no satanic activities whatsoever in this area.
Satanism may be a constitutionally protected religion, but similar to another recent case at the United States Military Academy at West Point, here charges surface connecting ritual child abuse at the Presidio Daycare Center to the devil cult. It was here, parents and others allege, that as many as 60 young children were ritualistically abused by soldiers of Satan.
What actually was done to the kids?
Oral copulation, sodomy, defecation, they were urinated on.
The former chief juvenile investigator at the Presidio, Ed Abanofsky, is here. He's now a deputy sheriff in Santa Clara County. Colonel Aquino, we note, sir, for the record, that you were originally implicated in the dreadful charges of child abuse. We note also that no charges were ever brought against you, and presumably you have been cleared. Would you like to comment on why those charges were brought against you?
Well, the entire time that the so-called child molestation scandal was occurring at the Presidio, the time period when these terrible events were supposedly taking place, I was assigned to the National Defense University in Washington, D.C., and my wife was out there living with me.
But is it not a fact that a 3.5-year-old girl identified you as the alleged perpetrator of molestation?
No, as a matter of fact, it is not the case. An accusation was made by her stepfather, who was an Army chaplain, speaking on behalf of this child. In her original interview with the FBI, she denied ever being molested.
Well, I've seen the... you are innocent until proven guilty. You were never charged in this case. I don't want to belabor the point. I have seen, however, the affidavits for the search warrant of your home, and they indicate the child is speaking to the authorities, not her father.
This was after she had been subjected to therapy.
Let's say you are innocent of that. You are no longer at the Presidio. You are now in St. Louis, but you are still a serving officer or colonel in the United States Army. Do you feel it is inconsistent with a high-ranking officer pledged, sworn, to uphold the Constitution of the United States that you are also a practicing Satanist?
Not in the least. The Army has known of my religion for the last 20 years. There has never been a problem with it, any more than there's a problem with other members of minority religions.
But let me read from the Satanic Bible. Quote, this is the number one, commandment. Death to the weakling, wealth to the strong. How can you believe this and still uphold the Constitution of the United States? Death to the weakling?
Well, for one thing, what you're looking at there is a highly polemical book that was never meant to be taken literally in all of its commandments.
Father.
Yes, and I'm aware of that, and I'm also saying that members of the Church of Satan understood that much of this book was in the form of a polemic. It was a statement that was dramatically made, but was not intended to be taken literally in all its respects.
So we should not take this book literally?
Correct.
This is Dr. Walter Grote, would you stand, sir? Whose daughter was allegedly abused at West Point, the United States Military Academy. You were a captain in the United States Army. Aside from what allegedly happened to your daughter, which I know you allege was part of a satanic cult, and having nothing to do with this man, I state again for the record, what is your feeling, sir, on the fact that a serving officer in the United States Army is also a professed Satanist, a high-ranking person?
Well, I think in this election year, we've heard a lot about values, Geraldo. We've heard a lot that our little children should be saying the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Mr. Aquino has identified himself as an antichrist. He preaches that as the leader of the Temple Set. I don't think I'm misquoting him. I find it inconceivable that we can have candidates talking about one nation under God and having our children say that, yet by the same token, we can have somebody in our army as a colonel leading our troops in battle who are opposed to the very concept of God and whose whole purpose it is to fight against God.
Intelligence agencies have infiltrated and created some satanic groups, with the resurgence of these groups beginning in 1966, particularly with the birth of the Church of Satan, founded by Anton LaVey. LaVey studied criminology in San Francisco and worked in the San Francisco Police Department Crime Lab. He also worked as an informant for Interpol. Prior to the Church of Satan, LaVey ran a group called the Magic Circle. LaVey's most famous associate is the National Security Agency General Michael Aquino. At the time of his membership in LaVey's group, Aquino was an Army specialist in intelligence and psychological warfare. In 1973, he became the executive officer of the 306th Psychological Operations Battalion, contemporary with his founding of the Church of Set. General Michael Aquino wrote, "From PSYOP to Mind War, the Psychology of Victory." Aquino's thesis stated that enemy populations could be subdued by inflicting a state of psychological terror and feelings of imminent destruction. He discusses the use of psychotronic weapons or electromagnetic weapons that influence the mind. Capitulation could be induced without firing a shot by extremely low-frequency signals piggybacked on broadcasts of radio, TV, or microwave communications in order to influence and manipulate the thoughts and feelings of the target population. During the 1960s, he was prominent in the Church of Satan and a close friend of Anton LaVey until he started his own Church of Set. A police intelligence report dated July 1st, 1981 reads, quote, "The Church of Set is a group of hundreds of members that operates on a national level. Michael Aquino is the official head and rules through a council of 9 who are in fact his lieutenants," unquote. At least 2 members of the Council of 9 at that time were members of Army intelligence. In the late 1980s, Aquino was accused by the San Francisco Police Department of being involved in a satanic child molestation ring centered on the daycare at the Presidio military base where Aquino was stationed at the time. Probable victims numbered at 68, many of whom had contracted venereal disease. 22 families filed $66 million in claims against the Army, claiming that criminal charges against Michael Aquino were dropped due to pressure from the Army. General Aquino admitted to renting the German castle where the Nazi SS were formed and reenacting the secret ceremony among fellow intelligence officers dressed in full Nazi regalia. General Aquino is now the highest-ranking officer in the National Security Agency, along with General Black and General Hayden. It is important to remember that General Aquino is first and foremost a military intelligence officer with over 40 years' experience in counterinsurgency operations and an expert in psychological warfare. General Aquino's psychological warfare campaign has started or infiltrated cults and other closed systems as part of a concerted effort to control large numbers of people and to destabilize the centers of constitutional and legal authority both here in the United States and in other nations. This methodology is part of a concerted plan that spans several generations. The Church of Satan and the Church of Set, as well as other cults and mainstream organizations, are closed systems with their own belief systems that are insular and separate from the reality that most people take for granted. These closed systems allow large numbers of people to be manipulated into performing antisocial acts that most members of the greater society would not contemplate. Aquino first participated in MKUltra related activities in Vietnam as part of the Phoenix program in the 1960s. These ongoing MKUltra operations are functioning as a counterinsurgency and infiltration operation aimed at destabilizing the United States and other industrialized nations. The following cults have been used by General Aquino or his associates to continue MKUltra operations outside of the laboratory. The mass suicides at Jonestown of 890 people had similar threads: a cult with sinister connections. Jim Jones, who had connections to the CIA, set up his utopian experiment on the same land the CIA had used to train mercenaries to fight in Angola. According to investigators, the Jonestown experiment was conceived of by Dr. Lawrence Laird Layton, staffed by him and financed by Layton. The African-American cult had at its core a Caucasian inner council composed of Layton and his family. Layton was a chemist in the Manhattan Project and head of the Army's Chemical Warfare Research Division in the 1950s. The People's Temple cult took over the Mendocino State Hospital as a part of a government pilot project to evaluate the feasibility of deinstitutionalizing mental patients. After a reduction in state funding, most of the patients at the Mendocino State Psychiatric Hospital were released into the custody of the People's Temple. Congressman Leo Ryan was assassinated in his attempt to investigate the cult. The pathologist in Guyana reported 80 to 90% of the victims' bodies had fresh needle marks. Other victims had been shot or strangled. In 1981, the survivors sued the former head of the CIA for, quote, enhancing the economic and political powers of James Warren Jones, unquote, and of conducting mind control and drug experimentation on the Temple flock. The Manson family was associated with the Process Church, which according to the Utah Department of Public Safety moved to southern Utah and changed their name to the Foundation. In a 1990 internal memo authored by church authority Glenn L. Pace, allegations were made of ritual abuse and human sacrifice. Pace writes that he has met with 60 victims of ritual abuse, but there were probably 2 to 3 times as many victims. 53 were female and 7 were male, 8 of which were children. All are members of the Mormon Church. 45 victims alleged they witnessed or participated in human sacrifice. The majority were abused by relatives. All had developed psychological problems such as multiple personality disorder. Quote, the memories come in layers. The first might be of incest. Another layer might well be the memory of seeing people hurt or even killed. Then they remember having seen babies killed. Another layer is realizing that they participated in the sacrifices. One of the most painful memories may be that they even sacrificed their own baby. I have only seen those coming forth to get help. They are in their 20s and 30s for the most part. I can only assume that it is expanding geometrically, and am horrified by the numbers represented by the generation who are now children and teenagers." Unquote. Dr. Joseph Mengele found that trauma bonding and mind control work best when the victim is forced to kill someone they love, usually a twin. The Franklin conspiracy refers to a sexual blackmail operation and savings and loan fraud that began in Omaha, Nebraska in the early 1980s. Larry King, a 300-pound pedophile, operated a national child prostitution network that catered to wealthy patrons and Republican Party insiders. King was one of the fastest rising stars in the Republican Party. He sang the national anthem at the Republican Convention in 1984 and 1988. King and his associates defrauded Franklin's Savings and Loan of $40 million and used the residents of Boys Town and other children to videotape powerful and influential men and women engaged in sex acts with minors. These blackmail operations took place during fundraising parties for the Republican Party. Those involved stayed late for the after party that included drugs and sex with minors. The strategy of early MKUltra was to use sexual blackmail operations that targeted political figures in order to ensure continued funding from legislators. Victims who came forward testified that King and his associates performed satanic rituals and human sacrifices. Many of the children who came forward with their stories have since been murdered or imprisoned. The most prominent and vocal victim has been held in solitary confinement longer than any other person in Nebraska history. Larry King served 2 years for fraud and was promptly employed by his good friend, the editor of an Omaha newspaper.
This is Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino, A-Q-U-I-N-O.
Transsexual.
Well, he's much worse than that. And so I'll get into that a little bit, but he's the expert that does MKUltra torture and mind control. He likes to sexually abuse, torture, murder children on film. And the police in San Francisco raided his home with a search warrant and found his home videos. And his home videos, of course, was him torturing and murdering children. They had all the evidence against him, but because he's a CIA officer, they couldn't arrest him. They had to notify the FBI. And the FBI came in, told the chief of police, destroy all records on Aquino. This is in '87. Why? Because this involves national security. And it was okay for CIA officers to go around torturing, murdering children, and even worse things than just torture and murder. 800 of Aquino's victims came forward from 8 states and said, that's the one that tortured me, that's the one that sodomized me, that's the one that mind controlled me, and I witnessed him do many human sacrifices. So here we had witnesses, and yet FBI came in every time, shut down the investigations, destroy all records. This involves national security. I've talked to 2 cops that in San Francisco after Polly Klaas was kidnapped. And we knew it was a retaliation for us exposing Aquino and this stuff in our county. And they said, our chief told us that because of what the FBI told them. So anyway, I want to show you this because here are written documents by 2 men who have seen Aquino do a human sacrifice at Bohemian Grove, risking their lives. They're victims of CIA mind control, programming them to go out and commit crimes. As little children, they were raised this way, and they're risking not just their lives, they're risking their children, their nieces, their nephews, all their loved ones' lives to help stop what happened to them. Very brave men. So now we have 3 men living in 3 states who've never met each other, all saying the same thing about Aquino. Okay, and one of them, of course, is in the Franklin cover-up. This is Johnny Gosh. Okay, this is his mother's book, Why Johnny Can't Come Home. Aquino paid $15,000 for his kidnap, and 2 people witnessed that, who come forward now and reported that we were there And yes, Aquino paid $15,000 cash for Johnny. He was used as a child sex slave from 12 until 22, and went to his mother about 15 years after he was kidnapped and said, "Mom, I can't stay. We're fearful for our lives for being here. We're fearful for your life. You can't even tell people what we're telling you." But the bottom line is that only reason I'm alive today is because you kept going on television, kept going on talk shows and radio and television, nationwide, Congress and everything. And so people would come in and pay extra money to have sex with me, even though I wasn't a child anymore.
He would go right through the guard shack. They didn't stop him for anything. Didn't matter who he had with him.
Okay, so it kind of implies that he was well known there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, Rusty, in your time with him around Larry King, did you ever see or know about any kind of cooperation that he may have had with any kind of government agencies, i.e. CIA or any of these other agencies that might be involved in some kind of covert activity?
Oh, yeah. You know, Michael Aquino was a colonel in, what was it, Army or...
He was in the Army.
He had various ties to, like you said, the CIA and the FBI, things like that.
Yeah. How much did Satanism play into the picture there? Was that a big part of it? What was it all about?
A lot of that centered around Michael Aquino. The Omaha World Herald was run by Harold Anderson.
Okay.
He had a farm place outside of Omaha, and they would go out and have various things out at that farm. Okay.
You're talking about ritualistic kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
And some of the kids were brought out there, the ones that were kidnapped. You know, that farmhouse played an important role.
So you'd surreptitiously shoot photographs?
Yes, I would do it for the purpose of basically having to protect my own butt. That's what Gary Caradori got killed over, was those pictures. The pictures I was getting were to get basically who's who and what's what. The kids they'd get them tooted up, and boys on boys, old men with boys. Occasionally they'd have girls. It was a lot of times the younger ones.
Now, I know what you guys are probably thinking. Oh, well, that's old information. That's really not relevant now. Well, you'd be surprised. Because, you know, if things aren't addressed and stopped and uprooted, well, they tend to manifest and grow into an infection that simply just continues to grow and grow and grow. And especially in today's world where things become modernized.
When we go to a hotel, we expect them to have Wi-Fi so that we can check our email, download files from the office, surf the internet, etc. When you undress for the night, however, you may want to close the cover on your laptop. According to files and videos released by WikiLeaks, a company called Gamma International sells its software to the NSA that can capture every single username and password that is logged onto the hotel Wi-Fi. In one Gamma International video released by WikiLeaks, it brags how the NSA can simply have one of their agents waltz into the hotel lobby with a laptop installed with Gamma International software, and everything that you once thought was private is now in the government's hands. Once they've captured your username and password, they can look at every single email, chat, and text. Have you sent any photos or videos of yourself that you want to remain private? Forget about it. It's now in the government's hands. Well, if they can look at what you send via social media, what else can they look at? Recently, an autistic 19-year-old, Jared Abrahams, was convicted of hacking into young girls' computers, turning on the webcam, and watching them undress, all without the webcam light coming on. Is this something the NSA can do? Of course. Enter another NSA-connected company, ominously calling themselves the Hacking Team, also revealed in WikiLeaks videos and documents. The Hacking Team company boasts that their software can turn your webcam on at any time, but they can also get audio. Did your 13-year-old daughter bring her laptop to the hotel on your last vacation that the NSA was sweeping up as part of one of their illegal investigations? One of Obama's pedophile goons may have accessed her computer and might be watching her daughter undress right this very minute. But there are no pedophiles among Barack Obama's illegal NSA spies, are there? Well, we know his Gestapo-like TSA agents often stick their hands down children's pants, so it would surprise no one to know that NSA pedophiles are watching young girls undress. Perhaps it's time to put a stop to Obama's NSA pedophiles.
I have for over a decade been working with a number of people on pedophilia as an elite privilege. For the Democrats, it's actually an acquired taste. John Podesta is a pedophile light. The Republicans and the elite in banking are the ones who have really made this a big league thing. There are Saudi Arabian restaurants with basements in Washington, D.C., where you can order children on the menu. Okay, this is what I have been told. I have not been to one of those restaurants. I've never ordered a child on the menu. Pedophilia is the Achilles heel, and Donald Trump has figured that out. Flynn's call included, and this is insider information, Flynn's call included a conversation about a list of high-level pedophiles in the United States, one of whom is Mike Pence's best friend. And Flynn did not tell Pence. That eventually came out. Now, the real issue, as Dennis Kucinich has very carefully pointed out on Fox, the real issue is that NSA has been spying on all of our politicians with impunity, and the CIA is leaking highly classified information as part of a political coup d'etat. If I were in Donald Trump's shoes, I would be shutting NSA down. NSA has no legislative charter. Donald Trump has the power to shut NSA down tomorrow. Donald Trump, for all of his flaws, is unshackled. And I cannot emphasize this anymore. There is one chance to restore the Constitution and restore the Republic. Now, I'm really pleased that Jeff Sessions and James Comey, who appears to have turned around somewhat, they're going after the pedophiles among the elite. A number of arrests are expected in the next week or two.
And that's putting them on notice. That's putting them on notice, isn't it?
Yes, it is putting them on notice. These people are extremely vulnerable. However, one of the problems that I have with Trump's current team is they don't seem to understand that the real enemies, the existential enemies of America, are right here at home. They are not overseas.
All I'm telling you is that I want to come back in 70 seconds and talk more about 474 arrests in LA of pedophiles and a bunch of kids actually kept in slave dungeons. That's not even on the news. That shows how it's a cover-up. Arrest all over the country. Arrest of Sandusky's son. We've got Wiener, child porn stuff. I mean, our law enforcement people told us this 3 months ago. So, I mean, this is really going on. And you know who hid one of the pedophiles? It's Donald Trump. And Sessions didn't either. They want to go after him. But just look at what we know about the Catholic Church and all this other crap, and it's just unbelievable. They're definitely covering up pedophilia in the news, and the huge, massive roundups of them. It's amazing.
Okay. So the spy community, the security community, that's what we'll call them because I don't call them intelligence. I've yet to find any sign of intelligence throughout the secret community. But I can say that corruption's everywhere. Corruption everywhere. Just like, it's almost like a meme. Buzz Lightyear. Just corruption everywhere. So, it's really sad. It's really sick. But, I mean, we kind of already know this kind of stuff. as a society, I mean, there are the little things that happen on the side that we don't know about. I mean, yes, the CIA traffics children, CIA traffics cocaine, CIA runs drugs, CIA does mind control. But here's a little interesting fact. Jeff Bezos, owner of the Washington Post and Amazon, has a seat, the director's seat, at the Pentagon. And has a $600 million contract with the CIA. Now, we're on the subject of trafficking. Make of that whatever you want. But let's look at the general army, the general military, while we're on the subject of the Pentagon.
And in today's news, child pornography. Link number 1, probe links 20 defense workers to online child pornography. This is Washington Post, as you can tell, and like I said, probe links 20 defense workers to online child pornography. Federal investigators have identified about 20 Pentagon employees and contractors who allegedly bought and downloaded online child pornography. In some cases, used their government-issued computers to view the illegal material. This is a 90-page report that came out from Department of Defense, and basically there's people who worked for Department of Defense who were downloading child pornography. Some of these people have top secret clearance, and that's the kind of people who download child pornography. And what does it tell you? What does it tell me? Well, it tells me that there's all kinds of people who use child pornography. This is not just some sick, crazy people hidden away in their basements. These are people who look normal, appear normal, go to work every day, wear a suit, say hello, probably have a family, normal kids, more or less, and that's the people who download pornography and they get caught. And why is it happening? My personal opinion, feel free to disagree, is because pornography addiction is a progressive disease, and when people view a lot of pornography, some of people get really addicted, and some of people lose the ability to make a rational judgment when it comes to pornography, and they go overboard and they begin downloading child pornography, and eventually they get caught.
The Defense Department releasing brand new details into an investigation involving child pornography and dozens of its workers and contractors, some with top-level security clearance. Not only are these very serious accusations, but investigators say some of the people involved were handling the nation's most sensitive secrets, potentially making this a matter of national security. Chief Fox Report correspondent Jonathan Hunt with the news. Appalling story, Jonathan. Do we know more about these people and their security clearances?
Well, we don't know their exact job titles, John, but what we do know is that they did appear to have been working, some of them at high levels, across a range of government agencies. Take a look at this, for instance, the National Security Agency, the National Reconnaissance Office, and the very secretive Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Others also worked on actual military installations, including Edwards Air Force Base in California and also the California-based Naval Air Warfare Center. So they had access to military secrets in some cases and military hardware, John.
Are all these suspects under arrest?
They're not all under arrest. We got 94 pages of investigative material from the Defense Department today, including dozens of specific individuals. They have not all been arrested, though. Some have been tried, some have been sentenced, but some have, the cases simply fell apart because of lack of evidence. And legal experts tell us it is always very difficult to prosecute child porn cases, not least because it's difficult to prove who exactly was on any given computer. Listen.
Who has the password? Who has the identification to get into that? Was it you who opened the computer and I went on it? Those are very difficult aspects in prosecuting. Then there's finding the victims. Are they abused victims? Are they underage? Did they appear overage? You know, there's a lot of difficulties built right into child pornography cases.
But Josh Hanshaft also told me it is imperative that the government find a way to prosecute in these cases because they are so important and so disturbing.
And this isn't just about workers committing crime.
No, it's not. The big fear here is that there is a possibility that these people open themselves to blackmail by a foreign power that wants to get information about our military secrets, or even terrorists. So the Defense Department is very concerned. It says they are taking all of these cases very seriously indeed, John.
I bet they are, Jonathan.
Keeping them honest tonight, potentially hundreds of military employees and contractors who may have bought child pornography online but haven't been prosecuted or even in some cases investigated. That's right, you heard me, child pornography. As many as 1,700 names, according to a U.S. Senator, on a list of 5,200 from an internet sting operation overlooked the first time around 4 years ago. Only now are they supposedly getting a second look, and only after pressure from investigative reporters and the U.S. Senator you're about to hear from, Republican Charles Grassley. The Pentagon porn story began in 2006. An Immigration and Customs Enforcement child pornography sting operation called Project Flicker produced payment records of about 5,200 people, many of whom provided Army or Fleet zip codes or military email addresses. Subsequently, the Pentagon's investigative branch, DCIS, began going through the ICE list to identify who actually was a DoD employee or a contractor. The investigation, however, only ran for 8 months and only cross-checked some 3,500 names for Pentagon ties, according to a senator. According to DCIS documents revealed in a Freedom of Information Act request, out of that 3,500, investigators uncovered 264 employees or contractors, including staffers for the Secretary of Defense and contractors at the NSA. 9 people had top security clearances, but only about 20% of those 264 people were completely investigated. Fewer still were prosecuted, and after about 8 months, the entire probe was halted. It left about 1,700 names totally unchecked, 1,700 alleged kiddie porn customers, an unknown number of whom may still work in some capacity for the Defense Department. Late last summer, after investigations by the Boston Globe and Yahoo News revealed the figures, a Pentagon spokesman promised to reopen the investigation, conceding that DCIS had stopped due to lack of resources. DCIS says it is now revisiting all 5,200 names, telling Senator Grassley's staff they've now identified 302 employees or staffers. The Pentagon's IG telling us, and I quote, "Any suggestion that the DoD Office of Inspector General or its criminal investigative arm, the DCIS, is not taking Operation Flicker and the issue of child pornography seriously is in error." But Senator Grassley says he is still not getting the cooperation he needs from the Pentagon. I spoke to him earlier. Senator Grassley, you were told that 5,200 Defense Department employees had allegedly purchased child porn, and yet you're saying only 3,500 of those names were cross-checked by a defense investigator to see if they were really DoD personnel. That's mind-boggling. Why weren't all of them cross-checked?
Well, we don't have an answer to that question, but it's quite obvious that the other 1,700 should have been cross-checked, and that's one of the answers to my questions that I want answered, and the implication of our question is they ought to be cross-checked. We ought to find out, because we're talking about not just general pornography here. We're talking about child pornography, and child pornography, taking that down is a crime. And also, there's an added factor here, considering the fact that there's a lot of secured information, national security information that the world shouldn't know, that a lot of times foreign operatives will use this sort of criminal activity to blackmail to get information. So there's a lot of things here that are involved because it's a Defense Department issue as opposed to any other department of government.
Right. I mean, sir, if your numbers are correct, 1,700 people out there who allegedly purchased child porn, we don't know if they were ever cross-checked or investigated, right?
That's true, and there's been some other names in the hundreds where there's the names have actually been given out that we don't know what's going to be done about them. Now, there's some reason to believe that it's a criminal act. It's been so far since it's happened that they could be stale. Maybe you can't have criminal prosecution, but we would be looking at administrative action to be taken against these people, and I want to know who they are and what administrative action's being taken.
Yeah, because what's even more startling is that of the 302 people confirmed as DoD personnel or contractors, only 70 of them were actually investigated. How is it possible that all of them weren't investigated?
Well, here's, I think, the thing that overrides everything you just asked, and that is we ask criminal investigators in the Division of Defense that does that, the extent to which supervisors of these people knew that this was going, and the criminal investigators couldn't even answer that question for us when we had a briefing from them.
So wait a minute, so you're saying we don't even know if the supervisors of these people were told that their employees may have downloaded child porn?
That's the question that my staff asked of the criminal investigators, and they could not answer the question whether or not supervisors had been informed of this. And if supervisors don't know about it, you know, it's a bad environment that things like this can happen in the first place, and worse, that it's a criminal act when things are downloaded.
Until you started raising this issue, I mean, this investigation was closed by the Defense Department. They only investigated for about 8 months. Do you think the Pentagon just didn't take this seriously?
Well, it's quite obvious that they didn't take it seriously, because it wasn't only that I was asking the questions. It wasn't until it started getting questions from people like you who are journalists that this got their attention, and we got any consideration and reopening of this in the first place.
Well, one of your staffers told us that getting information from the Defense Department on this has been like pulling teeth. Is that how you describe it?
Yeah. Oh, I've been involved in oversight of the Defense Department for almost all the years I've been in the United States Senate, and it's very difficult to get answers from a lot of bureaucracies, but it's quite more difficult in the Defense Department.
Senator Grassley, I appreciate your time. We'll continue to follow this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm Roy Potter, a former U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel. Pedophilia is an institutional problem. It's not just a problem in individuals. For instance, the one lone individual that Salon was talking to some time ago, who was saying, "Hey, I'm no monster." You may remember that. If not, you should go look it up. Salon promotes a pedophile, that he's not a horrible monster. But I don't want to talk about the individuals, because, you know, we think that these types of things, these perversions, are not often happening in society. And in fact, just the opposite is the case with pedophilia, because it's tied into satanic ritual abuse. It's tied into elitist, governmental level type of secret societies, and this is how they keep people in line and make sure that they're going to do what they're supposed to do. Plus, they believe that it unleashes some type of evil spiritual power for them. They don't consider it evil, but that's of course what it is. So that's the important thing that you need to pull away from this, is that it's now a massive institutional problem.
We have pedophilia all throughout the Pentagon and whatever other military installations, which, again, people need to understand that there are thousands of underground military bases that the general public does not know about. If this stuff is going on above ground, it's awful. So we have governmental department after governmental department. What next?
Calling me constantly. "Roger, what can I do to help?" You know how often I get that call? If it wasn't for that 98-year-old mother, I said I probably wouldn't be here. It was because of her will. She's allowed me to mortgage the home. She's been totally, completely, absolutely for me. She's been my military contingent. When I walk into the courtroom, up against all these guards doing all this kind of macho thing that we saw today, oh yeah, they puff up like blowfish, you know, trying to make themselves look important and intimidating, put their hands on their waist and all this kind of stuff. She just goes, "You should be ashamed of yourself," she says to him. Confronts him. And they just back away from her like a child. She's fantastic.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Well, Wilbur was the guy that looks like Santa Claus,
yes,
out of uniform. Now, Wilbur had his little girl kidnapped, and I heard that they took a film from him and of his little girl and turned it into a supposed porno film.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes.
The state of Oregon did that.
Yes, they were the caseworkers or someone that had the cut was having that little girl do her sexy dance, and was sexually explicit things with this little girl. The state workers doing this kind of thing. It's just unbelievable that kind of behavior could be going on.
The state employees have Wilbur's little girl doing a sexy, suggestive dance.
Yes,
This girl's like
yes.
4 or 5.
Or 6, something in that. Yeah, but
skimpily dressed.
Yes, on a video, and they are.
She's almost naked, right?
Yes, doing this kind of thing.
Or is she completely naked?
I haven't seen it, but that's
because I was told by one of the social workers up there she was completely naked.
Yes,
and they're showing this around the state.
And they're passing it around with these pedophiles that work for the state, for these caseworkers and all, and some of these judges, you know, they're the moral scum of the earth. I said to be doing this.
Should we abolish CPS? Would it be better if we just abolish this whole organization?
If you stop the federal funding, that will stop it.
The federal funding's the heroin being pumped directly into the veins.
That's it, because they're all chasing that money, and that's all they want. And so if you
and it actually led to turning Wilbur's little 5-year-old girl into doing this porno film. When she was taken from her father, they made her do this sexy dance, and then they show it all over the state of Oregon.
Now, and I've got her on film.
This is insane, Roger.
It's so criminal. It's so evil. I cannot think of anything more evil.
Why didn't Wilbur kill the son of a bitches?
I don't know. I think I would have.
If that happened to my daughter, there'd be dead bodies.
Yes,
and I wouldn't let them die quickly.
Yeah, well, you know, violence begets violence, but
you know, the Bible says there is a time when you can exact retribution. They rape your daughter, you get to kill the son of a bitch.
Yes, well,
they're taking this 5-year-old girl, they kidnap her, then they make her do porno films, Roger.
I can't. Yes, and in our name.
And you know that because you were from Oregon where they were doing this.
Yes.
You were involved in that case all this time.
Well, I came in.
You look sad even to remember it.
I am. I said it is so evil. I said it's so evil to be to children. The children are our future. The children are total innocence, and to destroy innocence, to inculcate them with fear. And to self-debase them in their mind by doing these kinds of things is so evil. If I could horsewhip them, if I could stop them from doing it, I mean, they would put a hand on her. I would lob off that hand without a second thought. Someone that would lay a hand on one of those little ones and doing that to them. And the fact that the state is allowing this to go on, and Pamela Gaston, where they were arresting her because she was standing with Will and fighting. We went to court with them, filled the courthouse, and they were prosecuting them. I forget what it was exactly, but they filed a counterclaim, and Judge Erskard there in Marion County allowed the counterclaim to be heard. And the jury came back in and found, they said you must find, the instructions were you must find them guilty because they did this, but if you find by the evidence that these facts were so, then you can acquit them. And the jury all came back and they acquitted him. And
acquitted Wilbur and Pamela.
Yes.
And eventually Pamela won the judgment.
But then the next day, the police came out and circled their house to take her son, because Wilbur they had categorized as a child abuser. So this is charging him with and he's done nothing, and arresting him and the perpetrators, these criminals that are doing this. They are giving them escort service. The pedophiles are giving the escort service in and out of the courthouse, arresting the victims when they try to speak in the court on the record about their victimization. That's what is going on in the courts in Oregon. I thought I was just dealing with a little pocket of this in Multnomah County when I got into this 20 years ago.
Multnomah County is what's big city?
Portland.
Portland. Mm-hmm. But it's not, Roger, it is nationwide. The pedophiles are inculcated in child protective services.
Well, if you are a pedophile, if you could work in a state agency, where do you want to work?
Where you can steal children and molest them. And that's what happened to Christine Ilsley's 6-year-old boy. I documented that. I showed how they made her have a visitation in a ghetto in South Central LA, the only little white boy and white woman surrounded by blacks doing drugs. And I zoomed in, and people who watch my show regularly saw that. There's a drug transaction going on right there, right next to them while they're trying to have a visitation. And the slovenly foster mom was sitting in the air conditioning on her cell phone, talking to more boyfriends. Yeah. And she complained. So Christine complained. They turned her 6-year-old boy over to a foster pedophile dad. They knew was a pedophile. And when she raised hell about that, because the boy talked to her, Mom, you know, this man did this to me and he did that to me. He raped that 6-year-old boy in Orange County foster care. Then they shipped the kid off to Wyoming.
But it's the
now the issue.
These horror stories, you know, we could sit here for years.
So how do we fix it? You filed your pleadings, you put them on the defensive.
The number one thing is for the people out there listening to this to become outraged, people, to become outraged that this is being carried on in your name. Every one of you have an absolute moral responsibility for the well-being of the children and for the well-being of your neighbors. And when you stand by and let these bureaucrats do that to you, shame, shame, shame on you. Be sure and include spittoons when you make your funeral arrangements so that your posterity can show you the respect that you justly have earned for turning that kind of evil over to the next generation, or allowing that kind of thing to go on. Here. My mother, if someone tried to lay a hand on us, there would have been blood on the floor. Blood on the floor. My mother, it's still in her mid-80s when they came after me in my 60s. She was fist clenched. You're gonna take me too? I mean, she was that.
She looks like a no-nonsense mom.
She was. I told people I was in my mid-60s before I had enough nerve to talk back to her. So she was a powerhouse woman. But I said, that's the children particularly. I said, they are our future, and to allow this kind of perversion to be carried out.
What percentage, Roger, do you think are pedophiles working in CPS in Oregon? Have you got any guess?
You know, I just don't go around with thinking those things. I didn't realize any of this was going on until I got into it. And Pamela Gaston was the first one that opened my eyes to this problem. And then you hear about other, you think are individual cases.
You think they're weird once in a lifetime cases. Yeah. Then you find out, like Christine's case, and you find case after case after case.
Yes.
I really like that show a lot. Taking Back America. Great show. And yeah, so big news, right? Big whoop. CPS, another government department, drenched and soaked with the stench of pedophilia. I quite honestly, I've got to get off the subject. I'm starting to get violently ill in between these segments here. It's making my skin crawl. What kind of people we have to deal with. The kind of people who just think they're just so superior to us and have to look down on us. Makes me sick. So let's cover another area of corruption.
Okay, in 1966, two dudes, Newton, Seal, black activists who want change. Back this up in this black activists who want change, Seal, Newton, in 1966, okay? Okay. They formed the Panthers. Why? Is socialism, self-defense, self-empowerment, change. Back this up and you have change, self-empowerment, self-defense, socialism is why they formed the Panthers. What's my point? No matter how you look at it, whether it's backwards or forwards, the message is still clear that the intentions of the Panthers was for a good cause. Why couldn't the government see that? October of 1966 in Oakland, California, Huey Newton and Bobby Seale founded the Black Panther Party for self-defense. The Panthers practiced militant self-defense of minority communities against the U.S. government and fought to establish revolutionary socialism through mass organizing and community-based programs. The original members of the Panther Party were Huey Newton, Bobby Seale, Albert Big Man Howard, Sherman Forte, Reggie Forte, and Little Bobby Hutton. The practices of the late Malcolm X were deeply rooted in the theoretical foundations of the Black Panther Party. Malcolm had represented both a militant revolutionary with the dignity and self-respect to stand up and fight to win equality for all oppressed minorities, while also being an outstanding role model, someone who sought to bring about a positive social service, something the Black Panthers would then take to new heights. The Panthers follow Malcolm's beliefs of international working class unity across the spectrum of color and gender, and thus united with various minority and white revolutionary groups. From the tenets of Maoism, they set the party as a vanguard of the revolution and worked to establish a united front, while from Marxism they addressed the capitalistic economic system, embraced the theory of dialectical materialism, and represented the need for all workers to forcefully take over the means of production. These type of practices were feared by the government. Why? In the early stages, the Panthers were looked at as another civil rights organization, not stirring up too much trouble. By 1966, 2 years into the Panthers' march for change, they started to run into a little bit of resistance, more than usual, that they had faced. Why? The Black Panthers formed alliances with a lot of minority civil rights groups, not until the Panthers started teaming up with the whites, who were involved in groups such as the SNCC, SCLC, and Students for a Democratic Society. The government paid them no mind. The Panther Party's power is growing rapidly. They can have a radical effect on our society if they proceed. We have to take them out, says the government. Those can't outthink us. We have to outthink them. COINTELPRO. J. Edgar Hoover, murderer, excuse me, was the leader of the FBI. He begun this little program called COINTELPRO. Here's a sophisticated way to explain what it was. COINTELPRO, counterintelligence program, to break up the spreading unity of revolutionary groups that had begun solidifying through the work and example of the Panthers. Now here's a straight to the point definition for cats like us who get headaches when we hear shit like that. COINTELPRO was basically designed for FBI agents to infiltrate the Panthers and start taking out the main people in the group to completely f the group off. April 6, 1968. Little Bobby Hutton. Doesn't he have just the cutest little face? Not any mortals went into his house, set the on fire, waited for him to run out, then they shot him 10 times. Oh yeah, he was only 17 years old. In Chicago, the outstanding leader of the Panthers local, Fred Hampton, leads 5 different breakfast programs on the west side, helps create a free medical center, and initiates a door-to-door program of health services which tests for sickle cell anemia and encourage blood drives for the Cook County Hospital. The Chicago Party also begins reaching out to local gangs to clean up their acts, get them away from the crime, and bring them into the class war. The party's efforts meet wide success, and for Hampton's audiences is widely organized and continues to grow by day. Boom. Fred Hampton's apartment is raided. Everyone gets arrested. Shots are being fired. Where's Fred? Well, Fred's dead in his bed with a bullet hole in his head that left his pillow stained red with blood. His wife is drugged into the hall and shot once, all while being pregnant for 8 months. 3 people were asleep in the same bed with Fred, but none of them are dead. They all escaped. Mark Clark got marked with a hollow tip while he slept peacefully in his living room chair. Oh yeah, there's more to share. 4 others are hurt with bullet wounds. Fred's helm left a tomb that he and Mark are left in. Fred 21 and Mark 17. Fred had a kid on the way, and Mark had dreams of becoming a family of a man of his own in a society that didn't want him to. What is he to do? He's dead. According to the jury, 90 bullets were shot. Damn, them Panthers didn't go out like no punks. Sure they didn't. 89 of those bullets came from the cops, and guess how many bullets are left that had to come from one of them? 1. You mean to tell me that all of these people were shot and unarmed? Well, at least 2 or 3 are unharmed. But you still arrested them all and tried them for attempted murder of a police officer when they only shot 1 bullet, which had to have been a reflex due to the fact that Mark Clark was sleeping in his chair with a shotgun in his hand. Let me make another point. We have already witnessed how this organization was making valiant efforts to help the community, and they were brutally taken out for that. Let's go back in time. You see this man? Yes, MLK began to change his views on nonviolence and began to make alliances with radical organizations. Soon after, he was taken out. See this man? Yeah, JFK. Yeah, he may have been Marilyn Monroe, but he was starting to become widely recognized in the minority community as one of the only politicians in the U.S. sympathetic to the civil rights movement. He was soon after assassinated. Do you see a pattern? How is it that we can have people like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Mark Clark, Fred Hampton, and Bobby Hutton, even to a certain extent JFK's horny? How can we have people who express the importance of equality and rights that we have as human beings, and as soon as they get people to believe what they believe, which is against the typical American system, they're labeled, as Hoover would put it, the greatest threat to international society? So what they do to keep the equilibrium, they'll just go to the extent of murder to keep their way of life accustomed to them. We just have to let you guys run over us. But I thought this was a democracy where the people make the decisions. No, I'm not in America. This seems like imperialism. No, it don't. So you mean to say that if you stand up and resist to them, they won't start another version of Hoover's COINTELPRO to come and find you and your family and shoot you in the head? No? Okay. You keep thinking that. It's sad that it actually scares people to the point where they don't say shit. Actually, let me take that back. It terrorizes people. There you go. Terrorism. Duh. Why didn't I say that a long time ago? The same thing these are fighting to end, they're doing right here at home to us. Wow. Think about that.
Here to weigh in on the shootings, policing, race in America, hip-hop legend Chuck D. Chuck, good to have you on the show. It's important to have this conversation with you today.
Yeah, even at this early hour out here. How you doing, Chris?
I know you're on the West Coast, and I appreciate you making the effort. You've been writing, you've been thinking, and you've been discussing the problems with policing, especially in urban communities, for decades. I grew up listening to your music and making me think about what was going on in the world that I knew and the world that I didn't. What do you believe to be the disconnect today between police and the people who are policed?
A lack of communication, a lack of education on how we are as a people, a total population inside this country, and not just inside this country. It seems to be a lack of education on people in the world. This situation in Dallas is the worst thing that ever happened after the worst thing that ever happened, after the worst thing that ever happened, after the worst thing that ever happened. And I think when it comes down to a movement like Black Lives Matter, these people who were born after Rodney King rebellion have been deferred, and as far as understanding what the hell is going on when they see these acquittals and yet the same brutality that's been going on since the beginnings of this time. But if people want to recognize a time, the 80s during Reagan and Bush was a real turbulent period with guns and drugs that came in an influx in the community. And the police brutality only increased. and the beginnings of my group, Public Enemy, a lot of people thought it was a policeman in the scope. Now, that was the young black person, a young black male inside the scope. So this disconnect that's going on right about now, I think what people feel is that Black Lives Matter is this violent movement. It's not. What it is, it's a movement against the violence. What it is, it's a collective of a lot of people speaking out against it. It's about almost like in the 60s when you had people protesting against Vietnam. You had all types of people. You have all types of people part of Black Lives Matter. You have all kinds of people that's actually coming out and speaking about this. And you have young people out there who are part of the Black Lives Matter movement who have parents and relatives as police officers. So it's about making a statement where these voices have been squashed.
But we also have to move past this polarizing negativity on both sides, whether it's people who, in the name of supporting the police, say, you know, the blacks, the African Americans, the minority communities, they're the problem because they don't comply and they create problems. Or it's the people on the fringes of the protest movement.
Chris, how long has that been going? How long has that statement been going on?
It's been going on a long time. All of this has been going on a long time.
A long time.
So
Probably
how do
since
we get
16,
past
19,
it?
You know, all lives matter is a great statement, but all the way up to this point, that wasn't even mentioned until Black Lives Matter came into effect. You know, this has been something where I think this generation, these last two generations are saying, you know, all this I don't understand, these acquittals, yet the murders, what is going on here? And I think that the other side has to realize that you got to get ready to know the dynamic of people. We want young people, young adults, we want our people growing into their 30s and 40s to turn from being dynamite into dynamic. But education, understanding that they have a chance in this economic system that they think is BS, the environment, and also have a say-so in enforcement, that has to be the narrative that people feel that they're part of. And they've felt that it's been lies the whole time.
But how do we do that? Because
if they're 30 years old, how do we do that?
Chuck, here's where I'm asking you. Look, where we came up and when we came up, there was all this talk about how there was not enough color in the police force. It was too white. So then they had this big push and they brought in diversity in the police force and you have it now. And then it was, we don't have cultural diversity. So we had multiculturalism. Well, you have a lot more diversity in the police force than you ever had before. You have a lot more multicultural teaching than you ever had before. You have hip-hop, which is a mainstream cultural dynamic, probably the dominant cultural influence in the country right now, and yet we seem to have the exact same problems. That's the confusion that I'm bringing to you.
The confusion is in the education, which you might say is diverse. It really hasn't been. The control over economics. You might say there's people in the community, they still don't own the community. And when it comes down to enforcement, they feel that, and people feel like it's still a slave patrol. People parade around in tanks. When my father was growing up in Harlem, Chris, he said police used to walk the beat. Whether they was black in Harlem, whether they was white or whatever, they knew people. They knew the dynamics of families. Families knew them. They walked the beat. This parade around in a tank, look out my window, oh, and then here's the quota system that we got to make this money, so we'll stop you for a tail light. We'll tell you stop, you know, selling these CDs. We'll throw tickets for jaywalking. This does not spell that everything is okay now that we have a diversity in the police force. It's still the same old game, Chris.
Look, we're still seeing the same problems, that's for sure. The question is, how do you move past it? I'm sure you'd like to see some progress as part of your legacy on this. You say conversation. Tip said we need conversation.
Hey, Chris,
but how do we have them, and with whom?
COINTELPRO ain't never stopped. Number one, the media has detached older black folks out of the narrative. It would be great to have Belafonte or Farrakhan or Maxine Waters continue to talk on and lessen the gap, not just between older blacks who kind of understand and see the game, or Dick Gregory, but not, and just younger blacks, but just younger people in general that's able to see older blacks spell it out for them. This whole, well, the young people are going to have all the answers when it comes, and you see 5 talking heads on television all competing against each other, and then you have a breaking news come out, you're going to flash over to the breaking news and leave the narrative. Young folks the last 30 years said, this is BS, this is some garbage. Then they see the political turmoil that's coming on, and they say, oh, politicians is just about that same old game right here. What do you expect in movement? One thing we appreciate with the movement that people are becoming less individualized, and they are collecting and coming together and making a statement, because they're ignored by the media, they're ignored by the politics, they're ignored by the country, and they're even gravitating to other places around the world who are looking at the United States of America as a crazy place that can't get it together.
So, for you people who think that the COINTELPRO, yes, it's killing and imprisoning a lot of black people. But the thing is, all about this stuff is that when it comes to corruption and greed, especially when the American Gestapo, the Illuminati police force, the SS of America, the only color that's really starting to matter is green.
2 Bloomfield cops have now been indicted. A third quietly pleaded guilty to tampering and retired. It's all because of video the cops may have tried to hide.
Get out the car! Get out!
This is the Bloomfield Police Department's dash cam video that prosecutors say they never saw when they pursued criminal charges against 30-year-old Marcus Jeter. Notice his hands in the air. He was charged with eluding police, resisting arrest, and assault. And also notice who throws repeated punches. The tape not initially turned over is on the dash of a second police car that comes from the opposite direction, crosses the median into ongoing traffic, and then strikes Jeter's car. There is no mention of that in any police report.
Next thing I know, as he's coming around the car, the glass gets busted, and all the glass goes in my face.
Get out the car!
Your hands are up.
My hands are up. As soon as he opened the door, one of the officers reached in and just punched me in my face. As he's trying to take the seatbelt off, he's elbowing me in my jaw. And I'm like, ah, and he's like, stop trying to take my gun.
Don't go for my gun!
Stop resisting arrest. Stop trying to take my gun. And as he's saying that, I just knew, and I was thinking in the back of my mind, like, okay, this is gonna go wrong.
Go for my gun! Get down! Stop resisting! Stop resisting! Why are you trying to get my gun? Get off my gun!
And right before when they opened the door about to put me in, the officer hits me in the back of the head again.
As soon as prosecutors saw this video, they dismissed all of the charges against Jeter. Interesting to note, an investigation by Bloomfield PD's scandal-plagued Internal Affairs Division had found no wrongdoing by police officers.
If we hadn't had the tapes in this particular case, an innocent man would be in jail today.
I'm sure that if this happened to me, it could happen to a bunch of other people.
We were there exclusively today in Essex County Court in Newark, where Bloomfield police officers Sean Corder, there on the left, and Orlando Trinidad, who you will see here on the right, were arraigned on charges including conspiracy, official misconduct, and falsifying reports. Trinidad is also charged with aggravated assault. They pleaded not guilty.
A Connecticut state trooper caught by his own dash camera stealing cash and jewelry off a dying motorcycle crash victim pleaded guilty on Wednesday. Superior Court Judge Robert Devlin charged 43-year-old Aaron Huntsman with 2 counts of felony, third-degree larceny, and tampering with evidence for a crime he committed in Fairfield on September 22, 2012. The 18-year veteran, who didn't realize his dash cam was recording, stole from the dying 49-year-old motorcycle victim, John Scalise. The crooked cop then stiffed the near-lifeless Scalise, stealing his $5,000 gold chain from a pool of blood and a $3,700 wad of cash from the former executive of JAS Masonry.
These 7 Baltimore City police officers arrested, charged with being hardcore criminals. The allegations range from stealing from innocent citizens to robbing drug dealers of cash and guns, some even of selling heroin.
These defendants allegedly were involved in stopping people who had not committed crimes and seizing their money, not only seizing their money, but pocketing it. So these are really simply robberies by people who are wearing police uniforms.
The alleged stealing from city residents was rampant, with amounts stolen ranging from $200 to $200,000. Prosecutors say the corruption included bogus search warrants, filing false police reports, and even putting in for thousands of dollars in overtime while on vacation.
These officers, they're 1930-style gangsters, as far as I'm concerned.
And authorities say there was a widespread cover-up, which involved coaching of each other to give false statements to internal affairs and turning off body cameras at key moments.
October 10, 2010.
911 emergency. I have a 17-year-old son with Down syndrome, has severe behavior problems.
Seen in a white 98 Plymouth Voyager minivan.
Vehicles all over the roadway.
Dashcam video shows Jeremy Hutton stopping at the intersection of Royal Palm Beach and Okeechobee Boulevard in the van he took from his mom. Palm Beach County Sheriff's Deputy Jason Frankie pulls around. Hutton clips his cruiser. The deputy shoots.
Shots fired.
Jeremy Hutton was shot 3 times.
He was shot in the head, he was shot in the shoulder, and he was shot in the arm.
He lived. Now his attorney is working to prove what the deputy did was all wrong, and the system designed to hold officers accountable here is broken.
The van was stopped.
Hours later, he explains to investigators what happened.
I watched the driver, he turned the wheel, and he just started coming at me.
Leaving the, quote, terrified deputy no choice.
Completely drew my firearm and started firing as he reached where I was.
Both PBSO and the state attorney's office justified the shooting.
And I was in fear. Fear he was going to hit me.
Case closed until...
I don't think anybody knew or anticipated that they were going to get caught by a traffic camera.
Because this traffic camera video, he says, shows an entirely different story.
But the traffic camera clearly shows that Jeremy Hutton not only was driving away from the deputy, but actually turned his vehicle as far to the left as possible to completely try to avoid hitting this deputy. So it's completely inconsistent with what was told by the deputy, and it's appalling.
The state attorney, which investigates to determine if an officer who shoots should face criminal charges for it, mentions the video in its final report.
Pictures don't lie.
But not what it shows.
So certainly there was no danger to this deputy.
Since 2000, the state attorney's office hasn't indicted a single deputy involved in a shooting.
It was a shocking police beatdown captured 3 years ago on dashboard cam in Bogota, New Jersey. 2 officers called by parents to assist their emotionally disturbed son into an ambulance instead tackled the man and punched him in the head. When Officer Regina Tasca intervened, prying the officers off the man, she was brought up on charges by her chief and eventually fired. The officers at the time even threatened the victim's father.
In that moment, my son was jumped and punched. Had she not been there doing what she did to protect him, I can pretty much say with certainty that things would have turned out quite differently.
Tasca, the only female and gay officer on the Bogota force, had previously complained to her bosses she was being harassed by fellow officers. And during the departmental hearing to fire her, the attacking officer from neighboring Ridgefield Park Police admitted that he covered up punching the victim. He lied about his training in dealing with an emotionally disturbed person and violated protocol with the tackle and punch. He was not brought up on any charges at the time. And the campaign to smear Tasca on the Bogota force continued, her own boss, Captain Jim Sepp, admitting he lied in his report to fire her by failing to interview witnesses, twisting quotes, and destroying notes from his own report.
Lying means that you did something wrong, and I know I didn't do anything wrong. I protected that kid. I did exactly as I'm trained to do.
The lawsuit alleges one of the officers before the arrest ordered all dash cams be turned off, but one of the cameras was left on, and the video would contradict what all the officers said in court.
This police dashcam video shows officers putting Joseph Sperling in handcuffs and violating, he says, his constitutional rights.
If it could happen to me, it could honestly happen to anybody. And I just happen to be one of the lucky few that has a video that proves that they were wrong.
The 5 officers involved in the June arrest, 2 from Glenview Police and 3 from Chicago, are now being investigated by the Cook County State's Attorney's Office for allegedly lying about how Sperling was arrested.
If the police want to make a case proving drug crimes, proving responsibility, they have to follow the law, and they can't lie.
The 5 officers all told the same story in court, that they pulled Sperling over for a traffic violation and that he agreed to a search.
According to them, they then took Joe to the back searched the car with his permission, according to the police, whereupon they saw the drugs lying in plain view.
But the lawsuit alleges the officers were unaware of the Glenview police dashcam video, which appears to show Sperling immediately being arrested before any search is performed.
In America, you have a right not to be searched unless the police have probable cause. They can't just walk up to you, arrest you, and say, hey, maybe you got drugs, maybe we'll find them.
Sperling admitted there were hidden drugs in his vehicle, but when the video came to light, Cook County Judge Catherine Habercorn dismissed the charges against him, saying at a hearing last month, all officers lied on the stand today. The evidence that's been submitted is directly contrary to their testimony. We were not able to reach anyone at Glenview Police tonight for comment on the lawsuit, but the department has said its 2 officers that were involved in the arrest are on paid administrative leave pending the state's attorney's investigation.
In June of 2008, the Omni Drug Task Force, headed by Lieutenant Davis, executed a search warrant on Rudy Simpson's Monroe County home. They based the search on an anonymous tip and a marijuana stem they said they found in the garbage. When the cops came in, Rudy's band was practicing in this basement recording studio. What the police didn't know is that the microphones were hot and everything was being recorded. Take a listen.
Hope they're not mixing.
But they were mixing, and 2 cops take turns singing on the mic, not knowing the whole thing is being recorded.
I love rock and roll. Looking back on the memory.
They found a 1/4 ounce of marijuana, 12 small seedlings in a pot they claimed were marijuana, and a half a pain pill that Rudy later produced a prescription for. These guys say the police seemed more interested in Rudy's stuff than they were in the drugs they found.
Basically, what I heard them talking about was what equipment, what materialistic stuff could they take out of my house. It seems like, yeah, that they were just trying to figure out what they could come out of here with.
And now, hear it for yourself. Caught on the band's equipment that the cops don't know was recording.
Yeah, well, who comes down here is going to want to take everything? Band, you're going to say that 1/4 ounce, at least a 1/4 ounce there is going to give us a chance to take all this stuff, you know, according to Luke. Hey, what do you want to take in the basement? You want to take the drums and all that or no?
The police wound up taking 3 pages worth of stuff from the house, including some of Rudy's personal property, a 52-inch flat-screen TV, a DVD player, 2 computers, a camera, and a bunch of DVDs. Under the law, police are only supposed to confiscate property that was purchased with money earned from drug sales. Rudy admits he was smoking pot, but what evidence did they have that he was selling drugs?
There was none. There was no sales. There was no undercover cops.
In Michigan, in a drug raid, they can take your property just with probable cause. And they can even take your property without charging you with a crime.
A body camera captured the moment Megan Sheehan was taken down by BART and Oakland police officers March 17th, St. Patrick's Day last year. This is what the bartender model looked like when she fell to the ground, and here at the hospital the next day. An Oakland cop grabs her right hand while the BART officer takes her left hand, and they throw her down face first. Oh! According to the police report, Sheehan was violently punching and that the officer guided her to the ground. Sheehan and her lawyer dispute that. Take another look at the video. Sheehan was lying unconscious in a pool of blood.
Megan, can you hear me?
Nurses were called. She was treated and taken to the hospital.
Former Windermere police chief is found guilty of perjury in connection with a child sex abuse investigation.
Yeah, Daniel Saylor was sentenced to 8 years behind bars after he was convicted of lying under oath during his friend's trial. That friend was later convicted of raping 2 young girls.
Daniel Saylor dropped his head when he heard the guilty verdict. It was role reversal. Windermere's former chief of police was the man being fingerprinted and handcuffed. Sentencing came next. Saylor begged for mercy. His voice trembled.
Don't really know what to say to you. I don't know what to say to Your Honor. Please have mercy on me.
But the judge gave him 8 years in prison as he left the courtroom telling his mom and dad he loved them. It marked the end of his brief trial, a trial in which Saylor was accused of lying on the stand during the child rape trial of Scott Bush last year. Bush and Saylor were friends. During the rape trial, Saylor took the stand, told the jury not one but 2 outside agencies, the Orange County Sheriff's Office and the State Attorney's Office, investigated the rape allegations. Employees for both agencies took the stand, said they did not investigate, that it was Windermere's case. Saylor's family left with nothing to say.
6 Philadelphia police officers now face decades behind bars in what officials there are calling one of the worst corruption cases in decades. Mind you, this is Philadelphia. They seem to know a little bit about corruption there. Here are the pictures of the 6 cops, and what they're accused of is unbelievable. All 6 either current or former narcotics officers. Over the years, the feds say they stole more than $500,000 in drugs and cash and other stuff from suspects. But that's really just the beginning. Investigators say these men often beat and kidnapped suspects. In one incident, investigators say an officer dangled a man over the edge of an 18th-story balcony to get information. At the same time, they say another officer or other officers stole a few $1,000s worth of stuff from the guy's place and ordered a pizza to pass the time. The feds say the officers even came up with a game in which they scored points by coming up with ways for defendants to be abused. The list goes on and on. Here's how the police commissioner reacted today.
I can say that I've been a police officer for more than 40 years, and this is one of the worst cases of corruption that I have ever heard.
One of the worst they've ever heard. Again, we're talking Philly. The city is zero stranger to police corruption. In fact, a former officer who pleaded guilty to stealing from a drug dealer a few months ago is now helping with this investigation.
And we know these people, I hate calling them people because to be a police officer, you have to be borderline personality psychopath. So, I mean, it's basically just a programmable robot that can follow orders and does so willingly. You become a true psychopath when you start enjoying brutality and whatnot. All these people committing these atrocities against the American people, all these badge-wearing criminals that are beating and killing are psychopaths. No question about it. But as I was saying, the color seems to be green here. The dollar bill. Revenue. Revenue, revenue, revenue. Pulling you over, giving you tickets, nonstop. Throwing you in jail for putting a substance in your body or holding a substance. Finding any excuse to kidnap your children so they can be trafficked. And it's really sick. Okay? So when dealing with the police, you have to be educated. See, they tell us that ignorance of the law is no reason for breaking the law. The educational system has failed us miserably. Why? Because they want to push, the general education, and the general education gets redundant, as most people don't use a lot of the things taught in schools. What do we use every day, or at least have to be subjugated to every day? The law. You're not going to find law taught in any public school in the United States. It's not going to happen. Hell, the Bill of Rights is hardly even gone over. Seeing a cartoon from the 60s on a PBS special talking about the Bill of Rights when you're in kindergarten, first grade, are you really going to remember that? As you become an adult? No, because they don't want you knowing your rights. But it's very important that we learn how to deal with these governmental officials, even ones as lowly as the ones who are supposed to be protecting and serving us.
I was invited to give you a taste of a typical law school classroom experience here today, and I thought I would take advantage of this opportunity to do something that's been on my mind for a while. to stand up and to proudly say, God bless America, God bless the Bill of Rights, and thank God for the Fifth Amendment. I'm not ashamed to say I'm proud of the Fifth Amendment, and I'm proud to admit on camera and on the internet that I will never talk to any police officer under any circumstances, with all due respect, sir. I'm doing something really extraordinary here today, something you'll almost never see another law professor do as long as you live. I'm really putting myself on the spot here. This was my idea. By my invitation, I have given up half of my time, approximately. I'm giving equal time and the last word to an expert who really knows something about what I'll be talking about. So I'm opening myself up to the possibility that he will contradict me. I was a criminal defense attorney when I was in private practice. So I want to make sure, in fairness to you, if I'm misleading you or giving you a slanted or one-sided presentation, you'll be able to get the last word from somebody else. I'm sure he'll have a lot to teach all of us, including myself. The Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution provides, no person shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself. And this unfortunate amendment has gotten a bad rap in recent times, much of it tragically and unnecessarily through, as you may have heard, the headlines. Now, here's the easiest question you'll ever get from a client in all the days of your life. Question, hey, the police are here, they want to talk to me. What should I do? Well, I could give you my answer to that question in case you haven't already guessed it, but why don't we go to a real expert? Justice Robert Jackson, a prosecutor's prosecutor. Like me, he began his private practice in Buffalo, New York, years before I did, and after that he served as general counsel for the Bureau of Internal Revenue, the U.S. Department of Treasury, the Security and Exchange Commission, Assistant U.S. Attorney General for the Tax Division, later the Solicitor General and the Attorney General of the United States, and then the Chief U.S. Prosecutor for the Nuremberg trials. That's an impressive resume. Years later, when he was a justice on the Supreme Court, Justice Jackson stated, quote, any lawyer worth his salt, today we would say his or her, will tell the suspect, his client, in no uncertain terms to make no statement to the police under any circumstances. There's the title of my talk. I'm here to explain to you the surprising and somewhat counterintuitive and admittedly unlikely reasons why Justice Jackson was right. I'm reminded of this because I'm amazed, we're all amazed, by the frequency with which we see newspaper articles coming out all the time from people who really ought to know better, who say, well, I'll talk to the police. I mean, after all, I'm a senator. I'm O.J. Simpson. I'm an experienced, highly polished individual. I've got a lot of experience with public relations, even criminal defense attorneys. There was a local news story here in the Virginia Pilot just a couple of months ago about an experienced criminal defense lawyer who ended up getting convicted of criminal assault because he talked to the police. He was accused of having assaulted another attorney in the hallway. There were no other witnesses to this. A woman said that he grabbed her by the throat during an argument over a case. He denied it. At trial, it was his word against hers. He said, I did not even touch her. But unfortunately for him, when the police had approached him earlier and said, would you be willing to answer some questions? He said, sure, why not? I'm an attorney. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I'm savvy. I'm sophisticated. I've got oratorical prowess. I'm accustomed to dealing with the police, by all means. And then there was a conversation that was not recorded. When the case went to trial, it was no longer his word against hers, because when he testified at trial, I never touched her, the officer took to the stand and testified, well, when I met with him, he said he did put his hand on her throat, but just as a joke. Then he had to take the stand again and say, that's not true. I never said that. I never admitted to you that now it's his word against two people. Who's telling the truth? We'll never know for sure. But he was found guilty. Now, here's part of the problem. The heart of the problem, as Justice Breyer on the U.S. Supreme Court explained in 1998, is, quote, the complexity of modern federal criminal law codified in several thousand sections of the United States Code and the virtually infinite variety of factual circumstances that might trigger an investigation into a possible violation of the law make it difficult for anyone to know in advance just when a particular set of statements might later appear to a prosecutor to be relevant to some investigation. One expert on criminal law recently noted that estimates of the current size of the body of federal criminal law vary, although it has been reported that the Congressional Research Service can no longer even count the current number of federal crimes. That's right, even the federal government has lost count. Number one, and this really ought to be good enough, contrary to what you laymen instinctively and naturally suppose, it cannot help. There is no way it can help you. Plenty of folks think that it can, and they're always wrong. You cannot talk your way out of getting arrested. Officer Brook, you've interviewed thousands of criminal suspects. Have you ever, how many times in your experience, have you approached someone, asked if you could ask him some questions because prior to the interview you had some evidence pointing to his possible guilt? And because of the extraordinary persuasiveness and eloquence with which he articulated his innocence, you said, oh, sorry, never mind. Bad call, my bad, I won't. And he talked you out of arresting him.
You know the answer to that.
Never. Never. It never happens. I've often asked other criminal defense attorneys, in all of your experience, have you ever once had a case where you looked back in hindsight and said, thank God my client talked to the police? They laugh at me. They laugh at me. They say, you've got to be kidding me. You cannot help you. You can't talk your way out of getting arrested. And contrary to what you might suppose if you never studied the rules of evidence, what you tell the police, even if it's exculpatory, cannot be used to help you at trial, because it's what we call hearsay. Under the rules of evidence, specifically Rule 801D2A, if you want to look it up, everything you tell the police, as the saying goes, can and will be used against you, but it cannot be used for you. From time to time, I've known attorneys who tried to call to the stand a police officer and say, "Officer, would you tell the jury what my client told you, because what my client told him is actually good for my case?" If you tried that at trial, the prosecutor will object that it's hearsay, and the judge will agree. The police will not be allowed, at your request, to tell the jury what your client told him, no matter how good it may be for your case. It cannot help. And that ought to be good enough reason. That ought to be reason enough to keep your mouth shut. But if you're not persuaded, let me go talk about a couple of others. Number two, obviously one of the most obvious. If your client is guilty, as many of them are, but even if he's not, even if he's innocent, he may well admit his guilt with no benefit in return. Now, of course, many of you are thinking to yourself, well, what's so wrong about that? I mean, shouldn't guilty people be confessing? Confession's good for the soul. It's good for law enforcement. It's good for the prisons. Yes, sure, all those things are true. And like the rest of you, if I or anyone close to me is ever the victim of some sort of a serious crime, I hope they get the right guy. I hope they convict him. I hope they put him away. We all feel that way. Hey, but what's the rush, friends? You don't got to admit your guilt the first time they come by to meet with you. In federal court, 86% of all defendants plead guilty at some point before trial. If your client is guilty and really ought to punish and really ought to have go through some sort of a cleansing act of contrition and fess up and admit his guilt, there'll be plenty of time to do that. They almost always do. No need to rush, no need to tell the police something. Wait and see if perhaps your client can work out some sort of an arrangement where maybe he'll make some sort of compensation to the alleged victim, or maybe he'll be able to get some sort of a discount in his sentence. And he'll be treated fairly then, like everybody else who had the benefit of a good lawyer who said, please do not talk to the police. And don't forget, by the way, even if your client only admits things that the police already knew, you might think, well, what harm can it do? He says he wants to talk to the police. All he wants to do is admit that he was there, but the cops know that he was there. All right, go ahead and tell him. Well, how can it hurt? It might hurt if the police officer becomes transferred to Minnesota, or deceased, or injured, or comatose, or cannot be located by the time of trial. The case will be dismissed if there's no confession. But if your client admits two things, that confession is freely admissible against him and can be a basis for getting him convicted all by himself. Senator Larry Craig can explain all of this to you. The Innocence Project of the United States has confirmed that in more than 25% of all the cases where an innocent man was convicted and then later released from prison after he was exonerated by DNA evidence, in more than a quarter of those cases, these innocent people we know to be innocent, made incriminating statements, delivered outright confessions, or pled guilty. How do they do that? He'll tell us all about it, I trust. Here's a couple of famous examples. You can just ask them. You don't have to take my word for it. There on the left was Eddie Joe Lloyd. He was convicted in 1984 of the murder of a 16-year-old girl in Detroit after he wrote to police with suggestions on how to solve various recent crimes. During several interviews, police fed details of the crime to Mr. Lloyd, who was mentally ill, and they lied to him and convinced this mentally ill man that by confessing, he might help them smoke out the real killer. He later signed a confession. It gave a tape-recorded statement. The jury deliberated less than 1 hour before convicting him on the basis of this confession. There was no other substantial evidence against him. The judge said, I'd hang you if I could, but the death penalty was not available in Michigan at the time. But after almost 2 decades in prison, he was released after DNA evidence proved that this man was innocent and had falsely confessed to a crime that he did not commit. On the right is Earl Washington, who was released from prison just a few years ago here in Virginia after spending 18 years behind bars after being committed of a rape and a murder that we now know he did not commit after having been exonerated by DNA evidence. But this man, Mr. Washington, who was in fact confirmed to be mentally retarded, was able to confess to several crimes at the request of the police, some of which we know he could not have committed. That's the problem.
Now, I really want to put it into perspective as to the people of this planet, and especially the citizens of the United States of America. We're dealing with cabals of criminals. Each institution that we have to deal with are infiltrated by agents of the aforementioned Illuminati. This is the cult that controls the world. I know it's not news to you, but you are also a cult member. I know you're thinking, oh, no way, I'm not anything like these people. If you support the system, then you are a cult member. I'm going to let someone who I deeply respect and learned from my early days of being a truther explain what I mean by this statement.
So what's the one true divide that exists in humanity? People say, oh, this is separation talk, and we're all one. No, we're not. There is one true divide that does exist in reality. And here's what it is. The one true divide that separates humanity into two distinct types of individuals. The criteria for this divide is whether or not an individual believes in, quote, authority, and therefore believes that there is legitimacy to slavery. The two groups of people are the people who know slavery is never legitimate and people who believe that it can be legitimate. That's what actually separates humanity. See, all the other things, divide and conquer. Race, religion, sexuality, income, religious belief systems. These are all divide and conquer techniques. There's one real difference, whether somebody believes in slavery or not. And of course, people have called the difference statists and anarchists, right? So here's a couple of memes that I picked up on Facebook. Statism is the brilliant idea that we give a small group of people the right to kidnap, imprison, harass, steal from, and kill people so that we can be protected from people who kidnap, harass, steal from, and kill people. Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense if you ask me. I think it's going to work out brilliantly with that system in place. Okay? So I found this picture of Jesus, a meme that says, I'm an anarchist, but most of my followers are statists. You know? People who are these fake-ass Christians who believe they somehow are following the teachings of Christ. And they believe in government. They believe in financial institutions. They believe in organized religion. These are the three things that killed Christ, if you even accept the historicity of the event. Who was Christ waging basic conflict with? The Pharisees and Sadducees, the organized religious order and controlling religious orders of his day. Okay? What really got him into deep trouble, he was pissing them off, but they were already on the wane. The old world order was on the way out, and the new world order was already on the way in at that time. You know? He got himself in real trouble when he went against the financial institutions, the money changers at the temple, taking people for a ride for temple coins. Right? And he flogged their ass. He took out the switch on them. Right? Not somebody who never got angry, who accepted evil and said, oh, it's just an experience, you know, none of it matters. Took out the switch and beat their ass for usury. Okay? And then who finally put him to death? The police of their day. The Roman Empire. You know, Roman centurions, the operating standing army and police of their day, the government. So who is he waging spiritual warfare against to try to bring righteousness into the world? And again, I don't care whether you accept it as historical fact or spiritual allegory. I could care less. Believe what you want. Doesn't matter. All that matters is the teaching. He was waging spiritual war against the three entrenched, mind control, religious establishments of his day. Organized religion, organized finance, and government. So a statist is an individual who erroneously believes there's such a thing as authority that is vested in certain human beings, magically giving them the right to rule over other people. This authority means that certain people who we call government have the, quote, moral right to issue commands to those whom they rule, those under their jurisdiction, and that their subjects or slaves have a, quote, moral obligation to obey the arbitrary dictates or laws, quote unquote, that are set by their masters. Most simply put, a statist is nothing more than someone who believes in the legitimacy of slavery. Conversely, an anarchist, a true anarchist anyway, is one who knows that there could never be legitimacy to authority or government, because those terms are simply euphemisms for violence and slavery and coercion, which are always immoral and in opposition to natural law. Let's look at what the word anarchy really means. Again, you got to break it down. From the Greek prefix an, which means without or the absence of. And the Greek noun archon, they're written in Greek script, which means master or ruler. And again, I mean externally. One who externally rules another or claims to be the master of another. That's what the term archon means in its connotation. Anarchy, as we can see by putting these together, does not mean without rules. The word archon does not mean rules. Okay? Because there's always going to be rules in effect called natural law, the laws of morality. It means rulers, imposed rulers. That's what archon means in Greek. It literally means anarchy now, putting it together. An, absence of, archon, master or ruler. The absence of masters or rulers. Externally imposed masters or rulers. Meaning, when we put it together, okay, it means without rulers, without masters. Now, if you give people that term, no masters, no rulers. No masters, no slaves. What word are they going to associate those phrases with? Freedom. But if you tell people, what does anarchy mean to you? What do you associate it with? What are they going to tell you? Chaos, which is the exact opposite. That's in that other column. Okay? They have deliberately obfuscated the meaning of the word through a mind control technique called endless repetition. If I could keep telling you a word doesn't mean what it means, that's not a projector, that's a hammer. Hey, could you check out my hammer over there and make sure it's projecting the image on the board correctly? You know, the bulb burned out in my hammer. I might need to go buy a new hammer. If I kept doing that endlessly, endlessly, endlessly for years and years and years, people would start calling that device a hammer. If I got enough people to keep calling it that. So they've gotten enough people to call freedom chaos. Think about that. They've gotten enough people to believe that the absence of the state of slavery means chaos instead of freedom. It's almost unfathomable. It's almost incomprehensible. The mind job that's been done on this species. It's almost incomprehensible. The fear of chaos. This is what keeps this system going. Chaos can't be viewed as something to fear. It's got to be viewed as a teacher, a harsh teacher, but a teacher nonetheless. See, chaos teaches us through the apophatic process what not to do. Okay? That's a bad idea. Okay? You probably shouldn't do that. If your desire is not to burn your hand to the point where it's blistering and flesh is starting to peel off of it. If you don't care about whether that happens, by all means, keep it right on that stove. Okay? Right on that electric stove. But, see, if you say, I don't want to be burned, there are requirements for obtaining that condition. It means you can't keep your hand on something that is extraordinarily hot, or natural law will take over and burn your flesh. Doesn't require your belief. That's how it works. Well, this is humanity. Humanity is the little child that is a little slow, and they want not to be burned, yet simultaneously they insist, no, I want to put my hand on the burner while the range is on and not be burned simultaneously. Well, good luck with that, folks. Because it doesn't work that way. You don't want to be burned? The hand can't be kept there while the stove is on. The end. You don't want negative, self-inflicted suffering and chaos in your life? You got to align your behavior to natural law, which means you got to know the difference objectively between right and wrong, and willfully, through your free will, deliberately choose the right action over the wrong action. Then you won't be burned. But as long as you have your hand on that stove, which means you're in opposition to natural law, enjoy the burn. Enjoy it. Right? Get used to it till the flesh melts off the bone and then the bones turn into dust. Because that's what you're going to get. That's how it works. And again, nobody wants to hear that. They don't want to hear that the natural laws don't care about you. They work flawlessly all the time and bring you the result that you're creating. The control and slavery system is actually about the limitation of free will through the destruction of possibility. See, all they've done, right? The old world order used to be religion and priest kings, right? We're in between you and God. We're the intercessors, the intermediaries. We make the law, you're our subjects, you're our slaves, you obey, or it's our wrath. All they've done is take the concept of a singular ruler, which was the old world order, and they've converted it into the concept of now there's a ruling class called government that gets to make up what we tell you you may or may not do, okay? And they're up here at the top of the pyramid now. That's all. They turned it from a monarchy to somewhat of an oligarchy. But it's the same concept. We're the moral masters that you have a moral obligation to obey, and you're the slave class, you know, that has an obligation to obey our commands. That's it. Nothing changed. All they did is say, well, no, people don't no longer believe in the priest king, so we need to create an institution where this quote-unquote authority is seemingly diffused through many people. It's always been nonsense. It's always been mind control.
A quick question I have is, I know you've mentioned before on the show, and if you feel comfortable, can you please give your tips on how you don't pay taxes? Because I think that's what you said you do.
Yeah, I only agree to work for anyone for cash. That's it. So that's an extremely difficult way to live in the modern world. I mean, that's all I'll say about it. I mean, so the money's going from their hands to my hands, and that's it. There is no middleman. That's why they want to destroy cash in society. That's why they want a cashless society, so that no one could possibly do that. See, my take is so much more extreme and different than most people. I don't care if I starve in the street. Most people do. Most people will continue to play ball with this system because they care whether they will go hungry and starve in the street. I'm never going to give you anything directly, if I can help it. It doesn't make a difference whether I die. The end. That's the level of courage that people have to get to. That's the level of courage that people have to get to. And we're so far away from that it's a joke. It's laughable, and they know that it's laughable. Do you want to see the whole idea of money? People in this movement still can't see that it's a religion and that it's all based on something that doesn't exist. A construct invented as a quote-unquote medium of exchange, when in fact there are only actual resources and actual people. You know what's going to be food in the future? You know what's going to be, money in the future? Food, seeds to grow food, anything that can shelter the body, and any form of weapon or ammunition to fire from that weapon. That's what money is going to be and exist as, which is called things with actual, inherent, objective value, with real intrinsic value, which is, can you eat it? Can you shelter yourself with it? Can you survive with it? Can you protect yourself with it? That's it. But most people don't want to understand that, and they're going to continue. How many people continue to give their support to the monetary system in general? How many people out there, this is what they're chasing? They're chasing an illusion. And it's all based on this illusion of security. You know, it's something I'm going to get into in a huge way in future shows. The support of this monetary system. And you know who the biggest supporters of it are in our society? The people who are practically the absolute neophyte worshippers of the monetary system is the female contingency of this society. As unpopular as that comment will be, women are so tied up in the belief in money. It's so few men really understand that money is an illusion. But the level of mind control that the female population is under when it comes to money being the source of some form of security and safety in this society is utterly laughable. They have almost 100% of the minds of these people.
Safety, security, beauty, acceptance. I mean, you should see you see the things that they try to promote in magazines.
But real freedom is never discussed. Real freedom, and this is part of the whole emasculation of the male agenda, because they want to take the sacred feminine, the sacred masculine dynamic of standing up for your rights and having the ability to defend yourself and the ability to provide for yourself independently away from the male of society, because they know they're the ones who if they're informed enough and have the ability to defend themselves, would be the ones with the physical strength to take action against this tyranny. And that's why they need to masculinize the women and bring them into the state and emasculate the men so that they won't stand up for themselves. I'm going to be getting into this whole gender dynamic as a big, huge dynamic of mind control operating in society, and put there very skillfully put into this society by the social engineers who are basically running the show. And it'll be unpopular, you know. I'm sure I'll be called the misogynist for, you know, alluding to these issues and bringing them to the fore. But so be it. So be it. People can think whatever they want. I'm not here to be your friend, folks. I'm not interested in your friendship. I'm not your pal. I'm not your buddy. I'm here to speak the harsh, plain truth so you can hear it and you can wake the hell up and start taking this country and this planet back from the psychopaths who have taken it.
Mark, have you heard from the IRS regarding how
No, and I will ignore anything they send to me. You're not going to get blood out of a stone, first of all. And secondly, I'm not giving you anything, pedophiles. The end. You're pedophiles. I know definitively what you're doing, what government is doing with children. I'm not supporting it. The end. Okay? The end.
Overseas, yeah.
You know, and once people understand that, see, if people really understand who they were up against, definitively, for real, they wouldn't contribute their energy to continuing to help these people. That's why, if I had any magical ability, all I would want is the ability to knock somebody unconscious and throw them in a ritual chamber with these Satanists. Because then you'll see chiefs of police, judges, teachers, doctors, lawyers, everybody at every level of every social institution at the highest positions of power are involved in the satanic cults. They're running your society. You'd see that in a heartbeat, and your eyes would be open to what the world is truly, suddenly.
So what this all boils down to is these, I want to say psychopaths, because that's what we're dealing with. It's not so much this cult, that cult. I'm not trying to put Catholicism down. I'm not trying to put government in its purest righteous form down. I'm not trying to put any people who actually do protect and serve down. But everything boils down to psychopaths, because, well, let's face it, psychopaths, if you know anything about them, psychopaths gravitate to power. Now, what they really hide behind and use as a tool is something called authority, which is a made-up, man-made mental construct, a man-made ideology. We know authority does not exist anywhere in nature, except for in the confines of society of humans. These psychopaths gravitate towards positions of authority, whether it be in government or a corporation or a cult. For those that can't make it to those positions of power, become serial killers. or do their serial killing once they've gotten into whatever official office that they go after and achieve. So we need to start our recovery of our society by recognizing these psychopaths. Now me, I come from a long bloodline of shamans. And yes, I'm part Native American, Cherokee. And something that the Native Americans did, I'm pretty sure some of you, if you watched my TV show, Red Pill Hardcore, something that shamans did, not only did they live outside of the villages, they would come into these villages and weed out psychopaths. That was their purpose. They held the power to do this, no matter what the chief of the village says. They held power to do so. They would spot children who were psychopaths, and it was made known to the entire village that this child was a psychopath. He used to never hold any position of power. Or if any were adults, they were usually killed on the spot by the shaman after examination. This is why the Native Americans had the most civilized societies and true democracy, as anyone could speak about the governance of their villages, even down to the smallest child that could speak. So it's up to us to emulate that model and start recognizing who these psychopaths are.
10 signs a psychopath is targeting you. Psychopaths are very dangerous individuals, but perhaps the most dangerous thing about them is the fact that they are hard to spot until it's too late. Too many individuals have been drawn in and charmed by a psychopath only to realize that a monster was lurking behind their seemingly charming facade. So how do you tell if a psychopath is targeting you? Thankfully, psychopathy has been an area of high interest for many psychological researchers, and they've discovered many traits of psychopaths that will give them away, at least if you know what to look for. Number 1. Grooming. Grooming is when psychopaths target and prepare their victims. Grooming can include a variety of different activities and tactics, like giving gifts, help, or favors, but the aim is always the same: win their trust and encourage submission in order to facilitate mental, physical, or sexual abuse. Number 2. Psychopaths will watch you carefully. Psychopaths view people very differently than you or I would look at someone. They see them as little more than prey, and the way that they watch their prey is not that different from the hunting tactics of a lion. Many reveal that when talking to a psychopath, it seems like they're not blinking or showing any emotion. That's because they're scanning you for any weakness. Number 3. Appear as a savior. Sometimes psychopaths watch you carefully to attack in a non-physical way. They will often come to you as a savior, pretending to have something you want or need. They will give them what they need, earn their trust, and then threaten to take it away in order to manipulate them. Number 4. Psychopaths use aliases. Interestingly enough, there are possible overlaps between psychopathy and antisocial personality disorder. People with antisocial personality disorders tend to use an alias when targeting people, as do psychopaths. Number 5. Psychopaths can be charming. When a psychopath approaches a victim, he or she will often seem incredibly charming, but the more sensitive and wary individuals will note that there is something wrong or off about this charm. It just doesn't seem right. That's because it's all an act, and the psychopath doesn't actually care about you. Number 6. Psychopaths will try to use you. The end goal of a psychopath is to get something from you. Many times, this is simply to watch you die, or to rape and sexually humiliate you. Other times, it can involve manipulating you into achieving their goals. Number 7. You might never see a psychopath coming. The most disturbing thing about psychopaths might well be their ability to blend in. This makes them difficult, if not impossible, to detect. You might not be able to tell if someone is a psychopath. Remember, they can appear anywhere, even in positions of power and responsibility. Positions that are supposed to be occupied by people that you can trust. Number 8. Psychopaths will talk in a certain way. Psychopaths have trouble controlling their desires, and this can manifest itself in a very visible way. Psychopaths often seem very impulsive and are unable to focus on one thing for a long time, especially if they are attracted to numerous things at once. This can become obvious in the way a psychopath talks and communicates. Number 9. Learned helplessness. Learned helplessness is an interesting phenomenon. It's defined as a condition in which a person suffers from a sense of powerlessness arising from a traumatic event or persistent failure to succeed. It is thought to be one of the underlying causes of depression. This is a commonly used tactic by psychopaths to psychologically break people. If you can instigate learned helplessness in someone, it will destroy their self-esteem and deeply humiliate them. Number 10. Psychopaths will isolate you. Another thing that psychopaths will often try to do is get you alone. This is because psychopaths can better manipulate you or harm you when you're in a one-on-one setting. They know that individuals, especially shy ones, will be more submissive and more likely to obey when they don't have the safety of others to turn to. In addition, psychopaths know that they are more likely to get away with their crimes if no one is watching.
Okay, so we know how the psychopaths operate. You know the profiles. The government has done so much time telling us not to judge people. You know, get along with everybody. Don't judge anyone. Don't judge a book by its cover. While they systematically profile us, separate us, and kill us off as they see fit. It's called doublethink. It's called mind control. So, something I've got to touch on here quite briefly is the fact that we need independent media. I'm censored. Not my show, not my documentaries, but the outreach of the show through social networks and so forth. But anyhow, I will always use clips in my documentaries of factual sources, and I'll even use some mainstream media stuff when they hit the nail on the head. You know, a lot of the stuff that makes it to mainstream media that, you know, say Operation Mockingbird doesn't want on the news, makes it to the news because it's so obvious, it's so blatant, everyone's investigating it. And they most certainly can't give credit to independent media, like myself, for our investigative prowess and honesty. So mainstream media has to cover some true stuff. And so I'll use that truth just as verification, even though a lot of it's fake news. I mean, I hope you guys have seen the weather guy faking not being able to stand up straight, almost being blown away by a hurricane, while two people are found walking just normal in the background. You can't even trust the weatherman anymore. But I digress. I'm going to give a nod to two truthers that do a great job. And yes, it's just, I don't care what you say. I like Alex Jones. Alex Jones is the man, so hey.
If you've been puking in your mouth like I have watching and tracking mainstream news, you know by now they're all getting it wrong with the Michael Brown shooting in Ferguson, Missouri. Everyone's spewing about race, race, race. Goddamn race. Bullshit. It's deflection. They don't want you to think about the real story. Paramilitary police. These mainstream news fuckers are pushing a provocative narrative instead of doing their jobs, holding the government accountable. At the same time, the federal government is flooding state and local law enforcement agencies with all the hardware and weapons necessary for playing Call of Duty in real life on suburban streets. There's an outright conspiracy to prevent accountability. In 2000, the Death in Custody Reporting Act went into law. The focus was to centralize reporting on the deaths of people in police custody. It was up to the Attorney General to collect and analyze the data. Fuck yeah, let's see the data. Nope, no data for you. It expired in 2006. I'll say that again. This important law was allowed to expire. Good guy Representative Bobby B. Scott out of Virginia has been working hard to get it renewed. He was successful in getting it overwhelmingly passed in Congress in 2009 and 2011, but the Senate just let it sit, refusing to even open it for voting. And just last year, Scott got it passed again. And guess what? It's just sitting there again. That's right, scumbags. Flood the police with more gear than a typical Marine takes in the hot zone, but block attempts for oversight or transparency. Fucking brilliant. Enter another good guy, Kyle Wagner from Gawker Media. A group of words I thought I'd never put together, but he's been spearheading a crowdsourcing effort to document every police shooting. Because would you believe there's no database of police shootings? Nothing, nada. The government can compile complex databases of all your phone calls, emails, and web browsing, but not a simple thing like officer-involved shootings and their results. Okay, but color me surprised when Kyle was met with resistance and outright lies by the FBI, state, and local law enforcement agencies. They repeatedly broke public record laws, and sometimes in the most bullshit way, by giving him the wrong addresses and phone numbers, lots of them, for basic shit, like police stations. Kyle also uncovered collusion between police and local media. Police would cut off the access of reporters who cooperated with Kyle. So mainstream media, you're part of the problem, part of the government collusion, part of the conspiracy of cover-up. Go fuck yourselves. You get a 97 on the bullshit meter. That's not all, people. These turds are popping up so often we have barely time for coffee. Here's a few quickies we know you'll hate. Do you think it's important for the U.S. Attorney General to have a law degree? Or the U.S. Surgeon General to be a medical doctor? Good, we do too. In November of last year, the FBI released a report that cyber attacks pose the biggest threat to national security over the next 10 years, or longer. So it seems pretty fucking important that our head of cybersecurity be some next level computer Jedi. Obama says bullshit on that. Michael Daniel, the guy appointed by Obama to be cybersecurity coordinator, recently bragged he has no such skills at all. In fact, he said, actually, I think being too down in the weeds at a technical level could actually be a bit of a distraction. What? You said that out loud? Like being too down in the weeds with infectious diseases could get in the way of heading up the, I don't know, the Centers for Disease Control? Epic next level government bullshit. 88. Keeping with the subject of computer security experts, this time a real, actual expert. The acting cybersecurity chief for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Timothy DeFoge, was arrested on a long list of child porn charges. As a registered member of Pedobook, Timmy apparently forgot to be extra careful about his own security. He used Tor, a tool that claims to keep its users anonymous when online. Poor hapless sicko Timmy forgot that the FBI infiltrated Tor, and when Timmy was registered on Pedobook with names Christ and PT Eater, the FBI found him and arrived at his home with a search warrant. They had to pry his hot, sticky hands from his laptop in the middle of downloading a kiddie porn video. Timmy, you disgusting freak, I'm circumventing our meter's patented technology and giving you 100. The world is getting buried in this next level bull faster than we can hit the record button.
I sit here for about 30 minutes going back over it, and then I just get freaked out and upset because I just scanned over probably about 75, 80, 100, I don't know, I haven't counted them articles, and I just see pure evil everywhere, pure lies everywhere, pure corruption. They're getting ready for more pushing the flu shot, lying on the news and saying it's mandatory, and housewives will line up and their kids will get paralyzed or have Guillain-Barrés or have seizures. And if it's a little baby, it's even better when the little baby goes to the clinic and gets the shot and has a convulsion in the car and has blood running out their nose, as tens of thousands do every time this happens. When they come back, the CPS comes with the cops, and they take all the woman's little kids that are with her there in the waiting room. Not only do they make blood run out of baby's nose, not only do they savage baby's brain, admittedly, not only do they give them Gardasil shots, killing them deader than a hammer, but if your baby happens to survive, the CPS with big fat pedophiles are going to have their way with them because they love it. They love it, and they know full well they're brain damaging them. They know full well what they're doing, and they love it. They love brain damaging your children. They love poisoning your water, and they love taking your kids once they degenerate them. It's so much fun. But hey, I'm not supposed to get mad by this. I'm supposed to like it. I'm supposed to love Bush 3 months into the Iraq invasion saying the war's over, and how Obama did the same hoax, and the public's just sucking down their lithium and Prozac and fluoride and loving it. Oh, and they can't wait to have their pension funds taken. They're just begging, oh, please rape us.
Yeah, indeed. So, whoever doesn't love Alex Jones, you've just got to be out of your mind. He's out of his mind so that we don't have to be. The man speaks the truth. I don't care how exaggerated or cartoony he gets. If I gave that much energy to these Illumitards, I'd have nothing left. God bless the man. And we have to support Alex Jones and getting him back on the horse. So, people, please do that. And with that said, I want you guys to know, this is just a warm-up. This documentary isn't anything compared to anything that I've got coming up. Just have to put into perspective as to who it is that we're dealing with. Who I'm dealing with. So, catch me for next week's documentary. I'm V, your host. And this has been another True Pharmacy Productions.